Okay, and welcome there, people, to this emergency episode of the Trans Agenda. So, a few things are going to be quite different. We're not really doing our regular sort of intro in all this because we just want to kind of get into the topic. There's a lot to talk about tonight. Tonight for all of you it will be because, sorry, it's just confusing with the times and everything. Of course, we are talking about Caroline Lowbridge and her article, We're Being Pressured into Sex by Some Trans Women, as well as putting a specific focus on Lily Cade, her history of sexual violence, and later on the Gender Critical Manifesto. Why do we say the Gender Critical Manifesto? Well, we say the Gender Critical Manifesto because it is the clearest example of what the gender critical movement, the self-proclaimed gender critical movement, has been working towards all these years. So yes, there is a lot to get through right here. We of course need to do our content warning for everything. So starting with that, content warning for the following topics: transphobia, homophobia, lesbophobia, biphobia, racism, anti-Semitism, rape and sexual assault, domestic abuse, the sexualization of minors, terrorism, and white nationalism. If you are trans at any point, if anyone at any point feel like you're being overwhelmed by everything, please do click away. This stream is not worth doing any sort of harm to yourself or anything like that. But particularly if you're trans right now, there is a lot going on. Your health comes first. You really need to take care of yourself. It's not your responsibility to tune in, listen to all this. You probably know most of this already. This is more as a resource out there for everyone else. You say banging nail polish, but my nails are chipped to hell. I have not had time to paint them this morning. I literally got up and decided, I kind of plan to do this a bit loose. And I was like, no, we need a structure. And so if you check the description down below, you'll see a link. It says it's just archived copies of both Lily Cade's confession about the serial rape and also the Gender Critical Manifesto. There is actually now a wealth of sources, links, archive stuff there. So do check that. You can also kind of get an idea of where we're going with the conversation, what order we're going in. We have a number of general chapters. I'll just list them off so you kind of have an idea. We'll be starting off with general issues with the article and its primary study. Then we'll be going into Lily Cade and how the article promoted a serial predator. From there, we'll go on to discuss the gender critical's predatory nature, how Lily is not an anomaly. She is, she represents the larger gender critical movement. And then finally, we'll be finishing up with the manifesto, because these other sections were actually written as part of a video I was working on before the manifesto came out. And I think it's worth doing it this way and then going back and saying everything I said in these first three sections is just proven without a doubt in this gender critical manifesto. So I know there's a lot of stuff to go over. Again, I just like to repeat the content warning for anyone coming in late. Warning for transphobia, homophobia, lesbophobia, biphobia, racism, anti-Semitism, rape and sexual assault, domestic abuse, the sexualization of minors, terrorism, and white nationalism. And I think that's really all I need to say at the beginning. Is there anything you'd like to add, Levi?
One thing I want to just do is apologize in advance if I'm a mess or if I take forever to make my points and pause because I can't think of what to say. I didn't get a chance to sleep before this. I woke up at 9 a.m. yesterday. Saw an emergency stream had been scheduled for 5 a.m. the next day, and I have been spending all the time between then and now preparing for the stream. And I had meant to try to squeeze a nap in, and then I realized that I just would not get the chance. So my brain is quite fried. So if you can be patient with me, I would very much appreciate that. And sorry in advance.
Oh, a big part of what we do here is inclusivity. We, of course, have a lot of neurodivergent people we work with and everything like that. So,
That is a point. It's not going to stop me from being ashamed.
People understand, okay? Like, no one's turning up here and expecting perfection.
I am. I'm the one person.
So, yes. Anyway, starting with the first section, which are general issues with the article and its primary study. So, of course, as mentioned previously, the article was written by Caroline Lowbridge, who last year began asking people about the cotton ceiling. We'll get to that later. And the response was pretty clear. From the anti-trans crowd, they rushed to her. Meanwhile, trans people kept warning her that there's a lot of misinformation out there about the topic, and very few people were willing to talk to her. Very few. That is key. That will come back later. The article then came out in the BBC just a couple of weeks back, and this followed on from the larger attack on Stonewall that I also covered on the channel, because the BBC is just going all out on the hate right now. And the article was, of course, titled "We're Being Pressured into Sex by Some Trans Women." Now, the article is forwarding this idea that there is a concerted effort out there by trans women to force lesbians to have sex with them, specifically cis lesbians, because they don't really care about trans lesbians, and many of them don't even acknowledge trans lesbians are a thing. So, pretty damaging stuff. We need to be clear here. We are not denying any specific experience. There are predators in all circles. I, at the beginning of this year, back in February, was sexually assaulted. I was singled out because I was trans. I was then attacked. This happens and it is tragic. So I am not denying any specific experience that occurred or is talked about in this article. However, the issue here is that the article takes these few experiences and presents them as more than an isolated incident. They present it as this concerted effort by trans people to force lesbians to have sex with them. And the way that they bolster this is they use a survey by Get the L Out. Get the L Out was, of course, a group which argues that lesbians are not listened to at all in the LGBT+ community. They need to get out. It's full of, lesbophobes, etc. However, when you actually start looking at their arguments, you begin to notice a few things. For one thing, Get the L Out is entirely grounded in lesbian erasure. The erasure of trans lesbians, the erasure of cis lesbians who date trans women. Get the L Out comes along and screams at these people, you are not true lesbians, you do not belong, you are pretenders, you are posers, you are stealing our valor, and then they have the sickening irony when people go, you know what, no, fuck you, these people are lesbians, we acknowledge them as lesbians. Get the L Out has the fucking irony to turn around and go, well, you're then erasing lesbians. It's one of those leaps in logic that has never been grounded in anything. They're arguing that by acknowledging other lesbians, somehow you are erasing their lesbianhood, which just doesn't make sense. No one said shit about them until they came out attacking other lesbians. You might actually remember them from 2018. A number of 8 members of Get the L Out stopped the London Pride in 2018, and they started handing out propaganda materials about how, the same sort of thing here, how lesbians are being forced to have sex with trans women, and also the propaganda surrounding lost lesbians, the myth of lost lesbians, and we'll come to that later as well. And again, this was 8 people. Because they don't have that many members. In fact, the survey they did was of 80 people. So, that right there shows just how void of actual basis this argument is, in how, they really do not have any sort of basis for this. Sorry, I'm just a little bit blanking here. But what's even stranger is the fact that whilst 87.5% and 95% of respondents said that they don't believe trans women are women or could be lesbians respectively. I do apologise for the truck. I'm just going to let that pass. Whilst 87.5% and 95% of respondents said they didn't believe trans women are women or could be lesbians respectively, only 56 reported that they felt pressured or coerced to accept a trans woman as a sexual partner. I know Levi has some discussion he wants to talk about there about the language used, but I just find it interesting that they had a sample that was overwhelmingly transphobic, and yet they could barely get half of said sample to give them the answer they wanted. That's just something I wanted to point out. But again, this fact is then taken and presented as there is this epidemic of trans women forcing lesbians to engage in sexual conduct when that is not the case. There is not this movement occurring. Again, there might be isolated incidents. I'm not denying anyone's specific experience here. But there is not this movement as they are proclaiming. Do you want to talk about the language stuff that you mentioned?
Yeah, I actually have a few points just to highlight how incredibly void of any legitimacy this whole thing has. So the survey of the 80 women, they say that 56% of women, hang on, it was in your thing, the quote, felt pressured or coerced to accept a trans woman as a sexual partner, right? So you read that and think, oh, trans women pressured them. And that's not what that says. It says they felt pressured or coerced by some unknown source. That could be trans women directly pressuring them, but it could be cis women pressuring them. It could be pressure from society. It could be a self-imposed pressure because of like some misconception they have. Like it could be literally anything. It's not necessarily trans women pressuring those people.
It could be their own conscience.
It could be they realize that they are being transphobic and can't handle that. And so they're like, if I force myself to sleep with this person, then that will mean I'm not transphobic. Yeah. So like even if they're saying half of women feel pressured by something to sleep with trans women, therefore trans women are pressuring them and predatory. That's not what it says. And like I also did the maths on this survey, and 56% of 80 is 45. So this is the only data that the article has, by the way, the BBC article. So literally that entire article with its reams and reams of rubbish about why trans women are dangerous and predatory and lesbians are under attack. All it is based on is this one survey saying 45 cis women felt pressured by something to sleep with trans women and 35 did not.
Yeah. Another thing, of course, besides having a small sample, there is the selection bias going on here in the fact that it was posted to the Get the L Out groups. So like, again, that's why so many of the women here say trans women cannot actually be women and they certainly can't be lesbians, in spite of the facts that, as we've seen with the statistics in relation to the GRA reform, the majority of women do support trans women and they support them a hell of a lot more than cis men. Sorry, did I say trans women? I mean, cis women support trans women a hell of a lot more than cis men. So, you know, there's that going on. It's definitively not a representative sample because it does not match the national statistics we have had from the GRA reform. So there's that.
There's a. I was going to say, could I just quickly talk about the examples they actually reference in the BBC
Sure.
article? Because here's the thing: it's like, yes, it's only 3 out of 80, but you would expect them to cherry pick the best ones. Like even an honest article would probably go for the worst cases. And here are their 3 case studies. Okay, so the first one was a woman who felt pressured by her cis girlfriend to have a threesome with her and a trans woman. One woman told me she experienced verbal abuse from her own girlfriend, a bisexual woman who wanted them to have a threesome with a trans woman. This is in the article about how trans women are pressuring cis women to have sex with them. This is a cis woman pressuring another cis woman.
It sounds a lot more like fetishization of trans women in the same way that very often bisexual women are fetishized by straight couples. You know, the whole unicorn hunting.
I did not think of that. That is a good point.
Yeah. Sorry, I did
That
not
is
mean to
why we
say
do these streams together. No, that was a good point. Thank you for interrupting me to say that, because I did not even think of that. I feel very silly. But yeah, second case study. Another woman said she felt so pressured she ended up having penetrative sex with a trans woman at university after repeatedly explaining she was not interested. Again, she ended up having sex with a trans woman after she explained she was not interested. It does not say she explained to the trans woman she was not interested. For all we know, this could be she explained to some cis friends about her gender critical beliefs and how she wasn't interested in trans women. And this trans woman never heard about any of that because she wasn't around at the time or whatever. And usually I wouldn't make such a distinction. I know it seems like I'm splitting hairs, but we've already demonstrated that this article is thoroughly dishonest. So it really does make me like the fact that they don't come out and say she told the trans woman she wasn't interested makes me feel like they're hiding something.
If you look a little bit deeper into like the survey and stuff like that, the survey, by the way, is titled "Lesbians at Ground Zero: How Transgenderism is Conquering the Lesbian Body." We'll come back to the whole conquest part later. So much stuff we'll come back to later. And you actually look at it, and they talk about dating sites, which like. Why not apps? We typically use apps, and usually apps, both people have to swipe in a certain direction in order to be able to even talk to a person. But like, you start reading about this and the way they're talking about things, you start realizing the issue seems to be less like they told a trans person they're not interested and the trans person continued to aggressively pursue them. The issue seems to be that they feel they can't tell a trans person, I'm not interested because you are trans, and not be called transphobic because of that. There seems to be this requirement for them to be able to say, I'm not going to date you because you're trans. Like, they don't seem to understand that they could just not date the person. They could just stop to responding to them or anything like that. They have to get that twist in the knife because it kind of suggests that there's almost this underlying desire to inflict pain upon the trans person, to let them know, I don't find you sexually desirable, nobody will, sort of thing.
Actually, funnily enough, I think I was going to be demonstrating that with my third case study.
So go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I'm done, so you can go on.
Okay. So the third case study says, and I'm reading off quotes here. I should have been saying that. I'm sorry. But yeah, they quote, they threatened to out me as a TERF and risk my job if I refused to sleep with them, unquote. She wrote, quote, I was too young to argue and had been brainwashed by queer theory, so they were a woman even if every fiber of my being was screaming throughout. So I agreed to go home with them. They used physical force when I changed my mind upon seeing their penis and raped me.
Nobody is denying that there are trans people who are predators out there. Like, again,
it's just
that's not the issue we're taking here. The issue here is that they're presenting this as a movement or even an ideology. That's a word that they have thrown around to no end. Ideology, the trans ideology, the gender ideology.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is they don't want people to think that there are just a few trans women who are like their ideology is very much based on this idea that trans women are not just predatory as a group, but innately predatory. In fact, like that's one of the things that they say in the article. Hang on, where is my note? Right, yeah. At one point, the article suggests that the majority of trans women are likely to be attracted to cis women because the majority of cis men are attracted to females.
That's ridiculous. It's been shown that trans people are more likely to be bisexual than anything else.
Yeah.
And like, it's not just like being gay or bisexual. there's also the fact that T for T is a thing. You know, there's this constant narrative we see in these transphobic circles where they go, why don't, you know, trans lesbians date other trans lesbians if they really believe that they're, you know, women? And it's like, do you have all day for me to go over examples? You know, it really is mind numbing at times. The way that they just refuse to see the actual evidence before them. The fact that a lot of trans people only date trans people because they know they can be safe. I also know the
Yeah.
fact that a lot of trans people only date bisexual people because they know that they're more likely to be safe. Um,
But yeah, the article forwards this idea, and it's like it's very obviously subtly hinting at this idea of, oh, see, trans women are just built to invade lesbian spaces. It's in their nature. They're innately predatory. And something I also noticed was this other person who really had, like, they had no reason to cite this person for this information, but whatever. This random woman said that fewer trans men are attracted to cis gay men than trans women are to cis lesbians. So, like, oh, cis gay men aren't pressured as much. It's just the women who are under attack, which is really weird because on one hand, it goes against the like compulsory heterosexuality they were pushing before. It's like, are the majority of people straight or aren't they? You can't pick one apparently, but it's also kind of playing into the idea that trans men are just lost lesbians, which we'll expand on later.
we will come to Chelsea Poe later, so thank you for mentioning that in the comments down below. We are reading those, just so you know.
One thing I wanted to acknowledge, I know I have a lot of notes, but I do.
That's fine.
I just wanted to acknowledge that throughout the article, there was a lot of unnecessary emphasis on how trans women are biologically male and like this part of their body isn't female and that part isn't, and it's something of a male. And I completely lost my train of thought. I'm sorry.
It's pretty much the same transphobia that I discussed in my recent Healthy Crazy Cool video.
Yeah.
You know, it's just a long way round, just like misgendering someone, like the whole biologically male and all this. It's like the person defines them.
Here's the thing: is like their whole thing in this article is a lot of cis lesbians, apparently, according to them, feel like they have to sleep with trans women, or people will think they're transphobic.
And the truth is that's just not the case. We saw this in 2018 when Get the L Out did their little shtick and blocked up Pride in London. We saw around the UK, you know, thousands of cis lesbians speaking out in support of trans people. You know, L with the T, B with the T, you know. So it just does not hold up. And we've seen the response to the BBC article where, again, thousands of cis lesbians around the UK have come out and just said this is not the general experience of the lesbian community. So, yeah.
Yeah, but here's the thing is, if that were the case, the best way to reduce the chances of that happening and to like help that problem would be to say, okay, listen, you don't have to sleep with anyone. You don't have to give any. You can just say you're not interested. It's like it's no one's business. No one's going to punish you. And if it is transphobia, no one's going to punish you. You have a right to refuse for any reason. But they don't do that. They spend all this time bogging everything down with this transphobia, with talking about how, oh, I'm not interested because I'm just not attracted to that sort of thing. And like, there's all of these really weird ideas that come along with that. One thing that like, I kept getting the sense that there's like this weird idea that if trans women were just cis women, then lesbians would just magically be attracted to them, as if lesbians are attracted to all women, which is just not how, and like, that's not how it works. It's not you're attracted to everyone of that gender. It's just everyone you're attracted to is of that gender. That's how. So there's that idea, and the thing is, that idea, I will talk about this later. There's this very much this us versus them, binary black and white thing going on, where like all women are lumped together, and it's like that we're all the same. Nothing bad ever happens between us. Everything bad is those horrible, horrible trans women. It's tapping. It's feeding into that.
Mm-hmm.
There's this idea of trans women as predatory men attacking vulnerable women. There's this idea of trans women as tainting lesbian purity, which is exacerbated by the whole focus on Lily Cade being a gold star lesbian.
I was going to come to that later.
So, I mean, there's of course just pure transphobia, demoralizing trans women, and also like this emphasis on women as trans women as biologically male, is to repackage transphobia as natural cis lesbian sexuality and like really insinuate that it's unnatural for cis lesbians to be attracted to trans women. And that's the thing is they're really hostile towards cis lesbians who happen to be attracted to trans women. They keep acting like it's a thing of my freedom to say no, but they're just so hostile to people who just happen to be attracted to trans women.
Yeah, I think that's enough for now.
I think that's basically everything.
There's a lot of stuff that's going to come up. So yes, let's move on to the second section, which is the fact that the article promotes a known sexual predator, and that predator is, of course, Lily Cade. Now, before we go into the whole serial rape stuff, I just want to go over Lily's role in the article. Why does she matter? Because it's been funny to see how when the article first came out, like gender critical people were running around going, oh, this is like the most important thing ever, these people are heroes, etc. As the stuff surrounding Lily Cade has kind of mounted, they started going, oh, well, why is Lily Cade important? And it's like, there's actual screenshots of the same fucking person doing this shit. So let's explore the fact of why Lily Cade is important and her relationship to the cotton ceiling. This story goes all the way back to around 2012 when Lily first accepted an offer to do a scene with Drew DeVoe. She agreed to do that after seeing photos of her, including her genitals, only to withdraw after finding out that Drew is a trans woman. As the article states very clearly, quote, "My sex drive was oriented towards women. I couldn't see past the fact that what I was interacting with was male genitalia altered by surgery and not the reproductive organ of a female ape. And I just couldn't get past that." End quote. So she withdrew, and then as a result, she began to be criticized by, and this is her own words here, quote, "very fringe queer porno people," end quote. So that's where things were. As far as Drew was concerned, she had left Lily alone. But there's a couple of things to kind of like unpack here, and one of those is the whole notion of genital preference. Because any time you talk about lesbians and trans women, without like it's almost like a Godwin's law of like trans people, the whole notion that there will be someone who will come along and will talk about genital preference. The fact is, Lily Cade had already seen Drew's vulva. She had already she couldn't tell the difference, right? That's why she accepted, only to suddenly change when she discovered that Drew was a trans woman. So it's really interesting here in how this case, which as we'll see is like the starting point for a lot of discourse, started with a lesbian who couldn't tell that a trans woman's genitals were the genitals of a trans woman. And the fact is, this isn't an isolated thing. It's not just a case of, this gold star porn lesbian, couldn't figure out that these genitals were a trans woman's genitals. There are tutorials out there discussing how a person can tell if the woman they are making love to is in fact a trans woman. The most famous aspect of which is, of course, the claim that only trans women have curly butt hair. I have linked actually the original thing that discussed that. That's kind of something that's been passed around a lot. But it's kind of this ridiculous telltale signs that someone is a trans woman. We've also seen this applied in other fields because, like, not just talking about genitals, but like they always know is the expression they use. Oh, sorry. Why was she even showing the other woman's genitals? Because they are porn stars. I should clarify that they are both porn stars. So like that's what I mean by a scene. They are porn stars. And yeah, Lily saw Drew's genitals and she was like, you know what, I will do a scene with Drew. Only discovered that she was in fact a trans woman. What is political lesbian? We don't have time to get into that. But yes, there are tutorials out there on how to spot a trans woman's genitals, and they are absolute garbage. When the curly butt hairs came up, my wife could not stop laughing as I showed her this for the first time. It really is sad, and it kind of makes what's the word I'm looking for? It reminds me of like the like incel culture and like their tells and signs of different things and all of that, and how they like typify different body types and everything like that. It also goes back to like phrenology and everything like that, and the whole idea that a trans woman's vulva isn't a real vulva and stuff like this. And yeah, so anyway, there are tutorials out there. This is not an isolated incident. It really does undercut the fact that this isn't about genital preference, because if it were, they'd be doing like talking about, oh, I only date trans women who have gone through surgery, which like is a whole other thing to unpack. But that's what they'd be saying. It's not. They are instead asserting, when they say this, they say that there's a genital preference, that every trans woman has a penis. They don't. Not even every trans woman has distinct phallus or vulva. There are intersex trans women out there because, spoiler, intersex people can be trans. So it really does show that this only relies on the basis of stereotyping. And you see the gender critical crowd and like the Women's Place UK at their founding were like showing photos of trans women and like talking about, here is a male in fishnet stockings jerking off. Apparently, he wants to be called a she, and stuff like that. And that's what it is. This whole notion that, trans women aren't women, they're just fetishists. We'll see that come up later in the Gender Critical Manifesto. But yes, it really does sort of tie into this whole genital preference aspect. I know I kind of waffled there. Is there anything you'd like to add, Levi?
Not really. Okay. I think I missed everything that you said.
Not a problem. But again, all that happened was she was criticized by, quote, very fringe queer porno people, end quote. That was it. Miss Drew did not interact further with Cade. Ms. Drew, not Miss Drew. Ms. Drew did not interact any further with Cade, though around the same time she began discussing the cotton ceiling, which was then later picked up by Planned Parenthood. I've got a quote here from Drew discussing not just the cotton ceiling and what it's about, but also the lashback she received on it. Quote, when I proposed the notion of the cotton ceiling a few years back, the violent backlash against me was profound. Not just death threats, but even more awful were the accusations of rape, of being a rapist. As a survivor of sexual assault, this cut deeper than anything. The cotton ceiling was meant as a means to question why certain bodies, trans or fat or disabled or racialized bodies for starters, are sometimes seen as undesirable, unfuckable, unlovable. It was not a violent term, but as is almost always the case, cis activists violently attacked the struggle for trans equality through making our bodies and identities intrinsically violent, end quote. And this kind of taps into the whole trans misogyny at the center of this, the fact that anything a trans woman does, even existing, even occupying space, is seen as violence. This goes back to Janice Raymond, the very existence of trans women, according to Janice Raymond, who is kind of the like the I'm trying to think of the word here, kind of like the prophet of what we're dealing with right now. She stated that the mere existence of trans women was rape of the female spirit. There's nothing you can do at that point. But as we can see here, the cotton ceiling is not about pressuring cis women into feeling like they have to have sex with trans women. It's not even just about cis women either. It does also discuss how cis men treat trans women, especially considering the fact that when you look at porn results on porn sites, we tend to see something very interesting. But it's just the fact that as a trans woman who has had genital surgery, and even a professional gold star lesbian could not tell her genitals were the genitals of a trans woman, how literally people will treat her differently because they find out she's trans. Like, someone can be up and raring to go, but the moment they find out she's trans, suddenly it changes. There is really that distinction to be had there. And the reason I bring this up is the fact that Ms. Cade has said that she believes it was her that was kind of used as the basis for Ms. Drew coming up with the whole cotton ceiling. In the article, in the BBC article, she stated that, quote, "I thought it was kind of gross. The language is gross because you are evoking the metaphor of the glass ceiling, which is about women being oppressed. So saying that if someone doesn't want to have sex with you, that person is oppressing you?" End quote. Just a problem here. That's not what Drew said at all. We just saw that with what Drew actually said. Drew did not continue contacting Ms. Cade. They did not try and pressure Cade into anything. They respected Cade's autonomy. They left, and they began discussing the cotton ceiling around the same time. Now, again, we don't actually know if Cade influenced Drew. I think it's very unlikely that she didn't, but here's also the thing. Ms. Drew was not talking about a one-off incident. She was talking about an institutional issue, something that had happened again and again and again. So, again, it's a bit odd that Lily is kind of bringing the focus onto herself to almost try and claim some sort of, some sort of notion of being oppressed here, whilst also lying about what Drew had actually said. Interestingly enough, Cade would later change her mind and would begin stating with absolute certainty that she is the basis for the cotton ceiling in her gender critical manifesto, as we'll come to later. Now, others have posited analogies to racism. I've got one quote here by, one second, my mind's just blanking, Ash Sarkar, who is a woman of colour, cis woman of colour, and she stated that, quote, that, quote, "Nobody should be pressured into sex with anybody for any reason. I wouldn't want someone to feel like they had to have sex with me out of social pressure. But it'd be fair to ask whether racism plays a part in announcing every 5 minutes that they'd never sleep with a woman of colour." End quote. In response to her, others began noting the nature of racist euphemisms on dating apps, especially the gay dating scene is notoriously bad for this. Euphemisms like no rice, as in no East Asian, no curry, as in no Middle Eastern or Indian, or South Asian. I'm trying to think, there's another one. But anyway, people use these racist euphemisms to exclude people on the basis that they belong to a certain ethnicity. Once you look at things that way, it's difficult not to see the similarities here and to ask why is the BBC defending this when they hopefully, I'm not so sure, they hopefully wouldn't defend the other. I don't know if you have anything you'd like to add to this section.
I
I have not been reading the chat since I started that. I will do that now whilst Levi thinks. Sorry.
There was something I forgot before that I guess maybe could add on to this is well, like the thing is, I feel like with some of these criticisms, there's kind of a post hoc ergo propter hoc thing going on where people will turn down trans women in a really transphobic way, and then people will dislike them, and then they'll say, "I'm being punished for not wanting to have sex with this trans woman," and I can kind of understand. I mean, like they're obviously arguing in bad faith, but it's the sort of thing where it seems like an understandable mistake because there's kind of this conflation going on. And so I want to be clear that the reason why people are upset with these people is because they've shown themselves to be transphobic. And the way they've shown themselves to be transphobic is by turning down the trans women because of the way they do it, but it doesn't actually have anything to do with saying no to sex. Like if they change their minds and have sex with these trans women, people still won't like them because they're still transphobic.
Replace it with any other work interaction. Okay, sex work is work. Let's discuss work. If you refuse to work with someone because they were trans in mining industry, you know, what would that say? Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut in like that.
No, that's a good point. Like demonstrates what I was trying to say.
That the transphobia is still there. The sex is irrelevant.
Yeah.
You know, and here, like, the thing is, like, nobody is running around. I gave a talk on trans people and also intersex people as part of my university's LGBT plus sex education, inclusive sex education, because many people hadn't received that. You know, we had cis gay man come and talk about, you know, cis gay sex, a cis gay woman, lesbian, come and talk about that, and I was kind of left to deal with all of the trans community and the intersex people, which I was kind of worried, especially about the intersex people, because I was like, okay, even with trans men, it's difficult enough, but I can at least talk about like the different mechanicals behind everything, pumps, etc. But like this is, I'm really worried about this. Thankfully, there was actually an intersex person at the end who came and thanked me for the coverage, so I think I got the pass on that. But anyway, at the end, I explained the facts that you always have the right to autonomy and you can withdraw consent at any point. That is an important fact of consent. You can withdraw at any point. And, you know, if someone refuses, their body is forfeit. Like, if you have to, like, assault them to get them off you, do it. If you can't guarantee your safety, you know, that's fine. But then I also noted the fact that if someone takes you back to their place and they undress and you realize, I don't, something about your genitals is making me uncomfortable, and it doesn't necessarily have to be the fact that they're trans or intersex. Maybe they have genital piercings you don't particularly like, that has an issue with you. Maybe, you know, you've only used to circumcised people and you don't like, you know, the fact that they have an uncircumcised penis. Whatever the reason is, there is still a way to draw out of that situation without making them feel like shit about it, without body shaming them about it, you know. And I was very clear about that. So it's interesting how what they're claiming is completely different to the reality of things. Sorry, and
I know, that's all good points, and it's nice because you actually know stuff about this and have experience with this sort of thing, and I don't. This is all theoretical for me.
I was
which
also
actually
the person who bought the dental dams. I never got my money back from the society, and I should have. So that's where a load of Patreon money from my YouTube channel at the time went. It went to dental dams, and it made a lot of people happy because they'd never encountered a dental dam before. Oh my god, it was like when that box was opened at the end. It was like fucking a piñata had just been broken up and all the candy had just fallen out. Sorry, that's terrible. Continue.
Actually, one thing I was going to point out is I have never been attracted to a trans woman, and yet nobody tells me that I'm transphobic. And like I'm demisexual, so I if people actually did proposition me to sex, which does not happen, but if they did, I would turn down a lot of people, and some of them would probably be trans. And guess what? No one would call me transphobic, because I would just say, no, thank you. I do not want to. I'm not comfortable with that.
Yeah.
That's all you have to do. It's interesting how if you don't make it about the person being trans, suddenly there are no problems with transphobia.
Yes. Linda Danvers, dental dams are important to know about. They are, and not just for cis lesbians, bisexual women, and trans men. Important for everyone to know about, because you can use dental dams on the rear to do certain things. So yes, you should definitely give dental dams a look. Sorry about that. There's just the PSA part of the show. Anyway. So that was her importance to the article. She brought in this whole notion of the cotton ceiling and presented the cotton ceiling as this violent movement to force lesbians to have sex with trans women, when that just wasn't the case. We can see it in what Drew said, completely unrelated at a different time. You can see it in how Planned Parenthood talked about it. But sadly, that's the narrative that's stuck. However, things started to get interesting as it came to light that in 2017, Lily Cade had been accused of sexually assaulting multiple cis women in the porn industry. It came to light, a number of people came forward about it and began talking to each other. And like it just started this whole snowball movement. And here's the really fucking interesting part. Lily Cade admits to it. She openly admits she raped multiple women. And there is a link to this in the transcript. By the way, just content warning, that website is a porn site. It's like a porn news site, so there's advertising for porn on there. There is also a copy of the confession in the document itself. You can find it on the side. It's under the title, Lily Cade's Serial Rapist Confession. It was not an actual apology. I should be clear about that here. First of all, she stated that raping other women was, quote, was my thing, end quote. She also used euphemisms like, quote, some girls didn't appreciate the bathroom trips, end quote. She is talking about rape and sexual assault there. And I know people are going to come at me, rape requires a penis, and no, actually it doesn't technically, it just requires penetration. And if you actually read some of the accounts, some of those people were penetrated by Lily, okay? She was fucking violent as hell about this. I know all rape is violent, but like she took things to an extreme, okay? And what's really terrifying is that she ends her apology confession by asking her victims to contact her in private. This is in spite of the fact that she is very clear throughout her confession, in which she names specific people that she has raped, that like apparently they felt too terrified to talk to me about stuff. As like, you know, oh, I'm quite a dominating character. It's like, and yet she ends by asking her victims to contact her in private, where she has all the power. You know, this is not a genuine apology. This is firefighting. This is designed to save her career. Because it should be noted, a number of her victims came out and they stated that, like, I have been telling new women in the industry to avoid Lily at all costs. You know, just run. If she approaches you, run. Train says hi. So, you know, oh, sorry.
I guess like this just shows the irony of, I mentioned how the article was kind of presenting it like cis women never have problems with other cis women like sexually assaulting them or pressuring them to do anything they're not comfortable with. Because as we all know, lesbians are just attracted to every single woman, are just ready to go to anything as long as it's a real biological woman who's involved. And who they cite in that article, a serial rapist who raped a whole bunch of cis women.
And it's about to get worse. But
It always does.
There's another point I was trying to make.
I'm sorry.
Not a problem, I'm sure. I will probably think about it in like 5 seconds. Contact her in private. They were wanting to. Oh right, yes. And actually, once you like read through that confession, and if you read not just her gender critical manifesto later, in which she talks about herself as being dead because she was cancelled for refusing to do like a porn shoot with a trans woman, her career had not ended by then. It blossomed after that. By comparison, it's the rape stuffs that seem to have like knocked her career out of the air.
I wonder why.
She seems to blame the whole fact that like she was Me Too'd on trans people. Like she blames the death of her career in that regard on trans people, and she talks about how she's dead now, so she can say whatever she wants, sort of thing. So that there seems to be that redirected anger there. Oh, I can't stop and reflect on the fact that I am a raping piece of shit. It has to be the trans women who are the problem. Of course, people began pointing this out, and the BBC came out and defended the article after all this criticism, stating that it had been through their, quote, rigorous editorial processes, end quote. Now, in my original video, I took that quote and I ran with it, and I was pointing out, oh, rigorous, like you didn't do a fucking Google search to see if this person, one of your main sources who you presented as an authority, was a fucking serial rapist who was outed like 4 years ago, not 10 years ago, not 20 years ago, not even 30. It was maddening. I was just pointing out, I don't believe they're either lying about their editorial process, or, they did know and they decided to omit the fact.
How editorial process is better than that? Hell, the writing process is better than that.
And then, more recently, it's come out that they knew. It has now been confirmed that they were told, the BBC was told by Chelsea Poe that Cade was a serial rapist. They knew this. They knew this before the article went out, and they decided to run the article anyway. What's also interesting is Chelsea Poe is a trans person, and how can they confirm the facts that the BBC knew this? Because they talked to the BBC in an interview for the article. The article that claims with no uncertainty that not a single trans person critical of what was being presented would talk to them. They omitted the interview that completely blew that apart. They are actually editing, and that's led to, it's the BBC scandal going on right now that people are talking about the fact they edited this. But again, they confirmed. They told the BBC that Cade was a serial rapist. They knew this, they ran the story anyway. That is what the BBC means by its editorial process. I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add on that.
It's not too surprising. Like I pointed out the square brackets, I pointed out the ways they worded things to kind of hint without actually coming forward and confirming the thing they were hinting at. There were signs that it's very biasly written while trying to look impartial.
So they knowingly presented a serial rapist as a trusted source on the topic of women's safety, because that's what they're doing. It wasn't just a case of she was like a little bit quoted here and there. She was presented as an authority, and we'll come back to that later. But yeah, and here comes to the part where we move on to the next section, the gender critical's predatory nature, since Lily is the trend, not the anomaly. And that's something that we kind of need to talk about here, in the fact that this is not at all surprising for a number of reasons. Yes. Sorry. Anyway, the first point that I kind of want to talk about in this section is the way in which the BBC kind of helps cultivate the narrative that really helped Lily get away with her abuse for so long. Here's the way they introduced Lily. Quote, Porn Valley's Gold Star lesbian because she only ever has sex with other women. End quote. Yes, we are going to have to talk about Gold Star lesbianism, and this is a topic I have personal experience with and is very frustrating. Gold Star is a term invented in biphobic circles, similar to Get the L Out, but of course Get the L Out is a relatively new one. These are older circles. In these circles, the act of having sex with a man as a woman is seen as something that permanently devalues you. This is then used as a basis to present bisexual women and bi lesbians as dirty and lesser. It also is used to call lesbians who may not have known they were lesbians or lesbians who wish to experiment as dirty or lesser. That's why it is both biphobic and lesbophobic. It is ultimately a form of supremacy. Someone is coming along and stating that this arbitrary characteristic makes them far superior to other lesbians and bisexual women. And it is used in this manner. It is used to police certain circles. They will shame any woman who has had sex with a man, which typically includes any trans women, because that's how they perceive trans women. They perceive them as men. So it is also transphobic as well. And it really is a disgusting sort of flexing. It shares a lot of similarities to other forms of purity, like the whole notion of virginity, for example. And we've seen how harmful the fucking inventive notion of virginity is when it comes to everything. And it kind of shares the same purity. Gold star, the whole notion, the terminology, is your star is fallen if you have sex with a man. You are no longer shining, you are no longer bright. You are tarnished, dirty, and dark. It really is sickening. It is a level of obsession in regards to your partner's past sexual experiences, or not even necessarily your own partner. It is a level of obsession with a person's past sexual partners that is only matched by the most toxic of masculine spaces, where it's all about, which women have you slept with? She's a dog, or she's a banger, It's all this sort of stuff coming through, except the binary is based on man and woman in a very transphobic way. Is there anything you'd like to add to that?
I think I had ideas, but they are gone now.
That's not a problem. It should also be noted the fact that Gold Star was Miss Cade's gimmick. It was her thing, implying that her many victims were bisexual or had experimented, as well as the fact that she got physically violent towards men who approached other women during orgies in almost this territorial display over people she didn't view as her equals, but her property. She talks about a male porn star getting on some lesbian action, and she physically assaulted them. Now, when I first read that, I thought, was she assaulted and did she respond? But no, that's not how she frames it. You would say, someone tried to touch me and I physically assaulted them. Why would you talk about it as if they were approaching someone else? And also the fact that, again, Gold Star is her persona. It's what makes her, implying that the other people were bisexual. Okay, she still refers to it as her lesbian actions. And it really does show this sort of possessive nature, and we will return to that later. I've never heard Gold Star gays, but that does not surprise me.
You've never heard Gold Star gays?
I have. Nope. My experience has always been Gold Star lesbians. I've had
there's Gold Star for basically every. I've heard of Gold Star gays. I've heard of Gold Star asexuals. I can't remember if I've heard of Gold Star that wouldn't make sense for Gold Star trans people. I feel like I've heard of it, but I could just be imagining that because I'm tired. But like, yeah, Gold Star gays, Gold Star asexuals are also a thing.
But like I've personally experienced this. Not, I say personal experienced it through Adita when we were starting to date. I am not much of a drinker. Shocker. I don't drink alcohol, not because of any like reason, like it's above. I just don't like the taste. I just never have. I also don't see the like enjoyment in getting drunk. I'm a very anxious person because of my childhood PTSD, so I don't like losing my conscious state. So like there were times like, at university, Adita would go off to drink with her friends, and that was fine. You know, we were two individual people who could do our own thing. Ooh. But then late one night, she came back fucking crying. And why was she crying? Well, there was a particular lesbian who used to be the head of the LGBT plus society before we were there. And she, along with someone Adita had thought was her friend, decided to go after Adita because as a bisexual woman, she was dating me. And not only was I, you know, not gender fluid, as I stated, I was just a man, but she was wasting herself on me. And they would not relent. And she broke down crying and came home. You know, I've had to deal with this shit directly. Because, you know, I had to comfort her, console her, etc. And it really is just absolutely horrific how this whole gold starring is used to attack anyone who doesn't have their gold star, effectively ostracizing them, making them out to be lesser. And that impacts the very way bisexual people are perceived. The stream will not be going anywhere, so if you have to go, it will be here forever. Sorry, I don't delete streams.
I guess it kind of goes back to the thing I said before about how that article, they acted like it's just like, oh, we want the right to say no. But any cis woman who is okay with dating trans women or having sex with trans women is attacked.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is they act like it's just about their personal freedom, but it never is. It's always about making everyone conform to their bigotry. Every single time.
And this impacts the way bisexual people are perceived. And it should be noted that bisexual women have the highest rates of domestic and sexual abuse of any sexuality. And no, it's not all due to cis-het men. You know, I've gone ahead and I've noted a study about this. It is also the way that people talk about bisexual women in general. Gold Star can be kind of like... I do apologise, there was a truck currently going past and I am currently very gassy. Yes.
Gold Star equivalent to trans people will probably be transmedicalism. That might be what I'm thinking of.
Similar,
I honestly
like there's of course there's a lot of nuance, etc. But
hang on, I can Google it.
Here's
That's a
the thing
I can
like,
do.
People might think that since a gold star lesbian has this superiority, they'd never date, you know, a dirty bisexual woman or a lesbian who has ever slept with a man. And that's just not the truth. You know, people who think this way, that they're the sort of same people who go, oh, person X can't be racist. They date a black person. Person Y can't be transphobic. They're dating a trans person. And it's like, you lot must be really shocked when you discover that the majority of misogynists are heterosexual men. You know, there's that whole absence there. And yes, it is used by, and I need to be very clear here, this very small community of biphobic, lesbophobic, transphobic lesbians as a means of control and manipulation. It is ripe for use in domestic abuse situations, which the abuser will always use their status over their victim as a means to make them feel undesirable and thus trapped. But yes, I just really wanted to go over that as we head on to the myth of the lost lesbian, which I don't know.
I'm supposed to have ideas for that, and I was typing in the chat, and so I missed everything you said before. Uh,
it's not a solid, it's not a like clean lead into, so you can just start solid again. Like there's a lot to talk about
yeah,
here. The focus on bodies over minds, the whole notion of sexual stock, when it starts to creep
yeah.
into the sexualization of minors.
I guess I can start with. I feel like this always comes up when it comes to the whole lost lesbian thing. Is there's kind of this perception where TERFs hate trans women and want to like exterminate all of them from the earth, but when it comes to trans men, TERFs just kind of think that we're cis women and just want us to be cis women. And like that's
That's not how
not
they
how it
feel.
works at all. Oh, they fucking hate us. Okay, I have to kind of contextualize this a bit by saying I have a lot of experience growing up uh, with being treated like property, not because of being trans. Um, how does Gold Star trans work? I am very tired. That's how it works. Um, but yeah, I have a lot of experience with being treated like property growing up, not because of being trans, because being assigned female at birth. My two cis male brothers were both very misogynistic, and one had no fucking filter and was just like, okay, yeah, you're my little sister, so I fucking own you. And I get to tell you what you can and cannot do with your body. It's my responsibility to make sure that you use your reproductive organs correctly. Um, and fucking TERFs, the way they talk about trans women is exactly the same. The obsessing over
Genitals and
like
breast
lost
tissue.
uteruses and lost pregnancies, and that is literally exactly the same as my brother telling me you can transition but you can't remove your reproductive organs. Like it's exactly the fucking same. There's like you say, there's
Like there
the
was a really despicable comic a couple months back where it was like I think it was a trans person standing next to a a mountain of like breasts that had been cut off. It's like this is about puberty blockers. It's like the fucking point of puberty blockers is to prevent like in trans men
yeah
is to prevent the growth of breast tissue so they don't have to go through unnecessary surgery.
I guess it's ghost boobs.
That's why I
Ooh.
say it's the phantom boob, and it really
Yeah.
fucking reminds me of like I don't know if they're still doing it anymore, but I remember when I was like end of school, college, there was this really big push by breast cancer campaigns on save the boob, and it pissed a lot of women off for fucking good reason. Because it was putting the focus on saving breast tissue when that's not the fucking harmful thing about breast cancer. It's the person whose life is in danger, you know. But a lot of cis guys around the time loved it, you know, and were even using it as like ways to make sexual harassment jokes, you know. And it reminds me of that. I'm sorry, I'm getting very annoyed at this, and this is
Oh,
something that
no,
really
it's
pissed me off
fine.
at the time, you know. And it is just like it's so fucking detached in priorities because again it's all about mutilating genitals and cutting breast off, and it's like what about their mind? That's what I care about, saving the person's mind. That's what's important, you know. All surgery, uh, it the definition of their definition of mutilation, the gender critical definition of mutilation is so fucking broad. All surgery is included. All surgery is technically mutilation under their definition. Um, you know, because it is life saving care. It's not just a thing that you kind of nudge into, it is life saving care. You know, it's amazing to see how much we fight for like like we need to protect like get it competence, we need to protect like the facts that in the UK under 18s were, you know, trans people under 18 were denied medical care even though 16 is the age of full medical consent in the UK, effectively declaring them second class citizens. You know, there was no discussion about who was the primary target here, who was the scapegoat, the person whose autonomy was like designated to be stripped away. The gender criticals do not care about like what they would class as the mutilation of boys. You don't really like. They sometimes say it as like an afterthought. We'll see that in the manifesto. The majority of the focus is on this whole lost lesbian idea, because
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
There's a reason why there is no trans girl equivalent of irreversible damage.
yeah,
Yeah,
the transgender like the transgender ideology plaguing our daughters. You know, there's nothing like
yeah.
that.
It's
There's no
always
equivalent.
it's yeah. It's almost always a focus on our daughters, and admittedly, some of that is just because trans women's lives are not valued. Trans girls' lives are not valued at all.
Yeah.
You know, there's that situation with the for example, the fire drill or the shooting drill. Sorry,
Yeah.
that poor trans girl being left out. But it's also because of this intense ownership of AFAB bodies.
Yeah.
And like that's the thing is, I was gonna say, I've been desperately making sure to hold on to this thought, is like the way trans men are treated. It is the very patriarchal idea of we own your body. Your body is the most important thing. Your breasts, your genitals are the most important thing. No fucking concern for the actual person.
Well-being.
It's the same treatment cis women get, where their well-being as a person, when it comes to things like abortion, when it comes to things like hysterectomies to deal with medical issues, them as a person never fucking considered. It is always about them as a breeding vessel, as property of a man, even a man who does not fucking exist. And that's what gender critical subject trans men to. And then there's this whole idea, of course, the whole point of the lost lesbian thing is, well, first of all, there's this assumption that all trans men are attracted to women exclusively, which is not true. A lot of trans men are bisexual, a lot of trans men are gay, trans men are, spoiler alert, also asexual or on the asexual spectrum. And then there's also so there's this assumption that the trans men are lesbians, and so when trans men transition, that's taking away sexual property. But then there's also the whole thing of being lost and confused and tricked by gender critical ideology, because they do not respect that trans men can make our own decisions. It's very similar to how neurodivergent people are, often told we can't be trans, especially like autistic people. People just straight up say, if you're autistic, you can't be trans because you can't be trusted to make that decision because you're not a full person. And it's the same thing with the lost lesbians thing is, if you were assigned female at birth, you just cannot make your own decisions. You don't know anything about who you are. We will tell you who you are.
And if you've ever wondered why these wealthy white lesbians are so cushy allying themselves with, white nationalists like fucking Yatesy Lennon, that's why, because the narratives are compatible in that regard. Like lesbians talk about the loss of sexual experiences, and like the other gender criticals, including white nationalists and bigots like Graham Linehan and all this, they talk about the loss of reproductive capability. Those two things, they meld together in such a perfect way. That is why, like, the gender critical movement is just a white nationalist movement with lesbians tagged onto it. That's what it is. Because they're like, you can talk about the facts that, of course, once they get further along, the Nazis are, of course, going to turn on the lesbians. That's what history has shown us they will do. But for now, their goals, their end goals completely align, and that is why they're so fucking comfortable.
It is. Yeah, it's a very fascist patriarchal movement. Actually, remember a little earlier, there was that thing of, it was in my head and it's gone. I'm sorry. I'm gonna have to.
Think about it for now. I'll just talk about the sexual trade stuff that came out last year in relation to the whole gender critical movement. Because you might think that I'm like we're like we're talking about motives here, and we might like be speculating on a load of stuff, but the fact is, people who have left the gender critical movement, such as Bo, like they have come out and told us exactly what happens during the recruitment period, because there is this recruitment period that like perceived lesbians go through. And this is quoted from an article from last year. Quote, one British lesbian even promised to find Bo a wife so they could stay in the UK and galvanise the struggling gender critical movement here. End quote. The quote has been edited as Bo has since come out as trans and has changed their name. I couldn't find their pronouns, sadly. But yes, so like that is what's happening. The gender critical movement is promising sexual satisfaction and like partner and all that if like certain voices continue to speak out. There's this trade going on, and where do you think they're going to get the resources for that trade? By brainwashing, like actual fucking brainwashing of trans men, denying them medical access, etc. So, you know, I don't know if anyone wants to say anything specifically about that.
I remembered the thing.
You remembered your thing. Go ahead.
I remember the thing, and I was smart, and I actually got my paper to jot down a note so I could remember it for 5 seconds because my brain is broken. The can't say women anymore crowd. Well, remember.
1 second.
Remember.
I'm gender fluid, so you're right. I will never be a woman. Thank you for that.
Oh, that's. Oh.
Yeah, you will never be a woman.
Shit.
I'm not a woman. So.
I mean, I'm a trans man, so yeah.
So, it's okay. Thank you for stopping by.
Go fuck yourself. But yes, the you can't say women anymore crowd. Remember a while ago, a certain famous author made a point about how, oh, you can't say women anymore because we can't say, like, when people talk about pregnancy and stuff in medicine, they don't refer to pregnant women. They've started saying pregnant people, and there's all this language which raises women. And at the time, I replied with a little tweet that got a whole 100 likes, which is a lot for me. And I said, you know, I spend a lot of time around trans people. I'm trans myself, and we say women all the time when we're talking about, you know, feminist issues with things like the gender pay gap and discrimination, and just, you know, listening to women's experiences, talking about women's accomplishments. We say women all the time. The only way you could feel like we can't say women anymore is if the only thing you think women do is give birth and like have periods. And it really is that idea where reproduction and that role is women's entire identity. And that's like really central to both fascism and the GC movement.
Yeah.
Is this idea that pregnancy and stuff has to, like that, and lesbianism has to belong to women. We can't include anyone else we don't like because it's their whole identity.
Yeah.
And that's very much part of the lost lesbian thing as well.
Yeah. And don't worry, we are coming up to the manifesto. I just have one main other thing that I want to talk about before that, and that's the fact that this supremacist movement is willing to do anything to defend said supremacist beliefs. We saw as Linda Riley, who, by the way, the founder of Lesbian Visibility Week, not to mention publisher for Diva magazine, Europe's largest magazine for lesbian and bisexual women, when she came out in support of the trans community following the BBC's initial article, the gender criticals began sexually harassing her. Like, you know, these are the people going out there claiming that they're here to protect lesbians, going out of their way to sexually harass prominent lesbians because said lesbian doesn't agree with their transphobic narrative. So it kind of shows that this whole notion of the whole notion that they're here to protect lesbians is completely bunk. They're not here to protect lesbians. They're here to protect their own sexual stock as they see it, against this invading horde of trans people. returning to the title of the questionnaire earlier, it is how transgenderism is conquering the lesbian body. Like, they are enacting that very specific imagery. You might have even seen gender critical start referring to women-only spaces and lesbian-only spaces, trans women being included in these, as colonialism. Which big fucking yikes for the racism there, because like you're really fucking trivializing actual fucking atrocity there. I wish I could fucking drag them to a few places in India to show them what actual fucking colonialism looks like. But there's a fucking racism behind that. But again, it shows this narrative. They have to construct this idea that they are the people defending themselves against this foreign invader, when no. Bi lesbians, always been a thing. Trans lesbians, always been a thing. Trans bi people, these have always been a thing. They've always been here. Okay, the Bisexual Manifesto. Do not assume that we are between two or duogamous and all that. In fact, do not even assume there are only two genders. Paraphrased roughly. There have always been these groups. No one is attacking them. No one is coming for them. No one is saying they have to sleep with anyone. They're the ones running around attacking everyone else for using their autonomy, because that is largely a big part of what they do. They attack lesbians for using their autonomy in dating trans women, and of course they attack trans men in using their autonomy to transition.
Also, something I forgot to say is they also attack like non-binary trans masculine and any non-binary person who was assigned female at birth under that umbrella. Mostly they talk about trans men because they don't acknowledge that non-binary people exist. And like most of the time they don't talk about trans men either because we're women according to them. But like everyone under that umbrella, I'm sorry, I meant to make that clear like the first time.
Yeah, I should have done that as well. I should have picked up on that. I do apologize.
Both. Like there's very short notice stream.
But anyway, there is this whole attack on the autonomy going on there. But with that done, we can finally move on to Lily Cade's Gender Critical Manifesto. Oh shit. No, there was one thing I forgot, and that's the fact that, again, self-proclaimed king of lesbians, Graham Linehan, decided to publish dating profiles from a marginalized genders dating app. Just for the fact that the people involved, he did not perceive them to be feminine enough to use the service, putting bisexual and lesbian women, among various other groups, at very real danger of assault. So, again, these people are willing to do anything to defend the supremacist ideology. But yes, Lily Cade's Gender Critical Manifesto. I need to start this section by defining terrorism, because as you might notice, anti-trans terrorist is in the title, and I am not hedging that in any way. This definition of terrorism is a legal definition of terrorism, taken from Merriam-Webster. Quote, the unlawful use or threat of violence, especially against the state or the public, as a politically motivated means of attack or coercion, end quote. Then we have the United Nations definition of terrorism given to us in 2005, which is, quote, which is any act, quote, intended to cause death or serious bodily harm to civilians or non-combatants with the purpose of intimidating a population or compelling a government or an international organization to do or abstain from doing any act, end quote. There's the intimidation there and the demand for going on. Yes, we can have a discussion about the definitions, but I'm reading those out. Let's read some quotes from the manifesto, and I'll let you make up your own minds there. This is the first quote. Quote, speak truth to power. Trans women are men. They know they are men. If these men can't slit the throats of these vile personas in public, admit what they have done, take off the dress, Look with abject shame upon the affront to God and nature they have wrought in the service of their masturbatory fantasies. Apologize for the children they have hurt with their lies and their drugs and their grooming. Apologize for the incarcerated women they have fed to rapist monsters. Apologize for the lesbian spaces they have desecrated, and devote the rest of their lives to repairing the damage they have done. If you left it up to me, I'd execute every last one of them personally. End quote. Then we have the next bit, and I would like to give a particular content warning on this. Again, if you felt the last quote was bad and you're kind of a bit shaken right now, again, you can drop out of this and come back at any time. Don't worry, it's not letting us down or anything like that. But yes, the next one is going to be particularly bad, particularly rough. And it is, quote, lynch Caitlin, lynch the sisters Wachowski, lynch Laurel Hubbard, lynch Fallon Fox, end quote. Of course, there's so much going on here with not just the transphobia and the lynching, but also the racism in particular relating to Fallon Fox, who, by the way, is a black trans woman. This just really shows just what extent the gender critical movement is willing to go to in order to uphold this supremacy that they hold. I actually went and I talked to Fallon Fox about this, and she gave me a statement I'd just like to read out, which, funnily enough, fucking trucks, which funnily enough kind of coincided with thoughts I was having already. Like, a lot of what we did in the first 3 sections was actually in the script I had already written, and we just kind of cannibalized that. And what she told me was, quote, I'd like to say that what Lily Cade wrote is an example of what the majority of TERFs think about us. She's just saying the quiet part out loud, end quote. So I'd like to thank Fallon Fox for that. And again, we clearly agree. That's why we had the whole section where it was like, this is not just like Lily Cade here. Lily Cade is not an anomaly. She is the face of the gender critical movement. She is this whole manifesto is an amalgamation of everything they have been working towards the past several years.
Actually, can I just talk about my experience from reading through the manifesto? At first, I was just really confused because it wasn't exactly incoherent, but like it's a lot of rambling and a lot of anger and a lot of just asserting that trans women are bad with like nothing to back it up. Mm-hmm. And I just did not know what to do with any of it. And then I was reading through again and again, kind of just slowly processing in the back of my mind. And then something in my head clicked, and I just changed the phrasing into more familiar words. And I realized this is just all the tropes. This is just all the tropes, but in more colorful language. If I had an actual bingo card, I wanted to make a bingo card just to check off all of the tropes. It's exactly the same. If you want, it's just more violent and more explicit.
This is the opera to the singles that people have, like the singles that gender criticals have been putting out over the years. This is just bringing it all together under one roof and putting it as one display. That's all this is. I have another quote here that I just want to read out in relation to this section, and then we'll go back to our definitions of terrorism. Quote, pedos get the wall. Comos get the wall? Where the fuck are the Marines? Where the fuck is the army? Where the fuck are the farmers with pitchforks? Where are the cowboys? Where are the Indians? Where the fuck are the men? Where the fuck are the mothers? How can you stand for this? If my grandfather and all his brothers who stood up to Hitler were still here, they would rip the still beating hearts from every last one of these paedophile monsters in public the same way they have raped your kids. End quote. Yeah, this is using the threat of violence. Okay, she's fucking calling this, and that's why I'm not hedging this. Some people I've seen have been calling this stochastic terrorism. This is not stochastic terrorism. Something you need to understand about stochastic terrorism is you never do the actual call to action. The most you might be able to say under stochastic terrorism is someone needs to do something. That very generic. Someone needs to do something. Or someone could take it this way and do this. I'm not saying they should, but but they could do it. That's the closest stochastic terrorism comes to actually call to action. This is just a fucking call to action. That's why it's not borderline terrorism, it's not stochastic terrorism, it's just straight up terrorism. Okay? It is targeting the trans community, it's calling for direct violence against the trans community. There is no grey here. Okay? And there was something I was going to say. On the note, the fact that the whole fucking Nazi shit is also especially disgusting, considering the facts that who were the people the Nazis fucking targeted? One of the first fucking groups. Oh, it was, I'm going to say it wrong, aren't I? And then, is it Higgins who comes after me? Hirschfield School for Sexual Wissenschaft. They were leading the science on trans people. The terminology is old and all that, but when you actually look at what they were doing, they weren't dealing with cross-dressers, they were dealing with early forms of medical transitioning and everything like that. They were the place targeted by the Nazis where the vast majority of the books for the book burnings came from. Their reports, their documents, trans history completely erased in a night. Okay? So yeah, that's especially disgusting here, considering that she is the one. She is, Lily Cade is the one going on about the degeneracy in society and everything. Which I think, of course, is there anything else you'd like to add to this section before I go on to, the charges of paedophilia and specifically talk about that?
I don't think so.
Okay. And of course, something that especially comes in with a lot of trans misogyny are the constant charges of paedophilia. You've already heard several examples in there. I'm not going to reread those quotes, but there are a few more here. Quote, "This is a paedophile cult. This is the real paedophile cult that has been staring you in the face the whole time laughing. Masturbating. The naked emperor stroking his cock while you try to find some new nice words to explain gently to him in newspeak that you would like him to stop and that he is naked. Newspeak doesn't have those words." End quote. Okay, if we currently created newspeak that doesn't have those words, and yet you're using those words, that isn't newspeak. This goes back to what I talked about a few videos back. I think it was Brittany Selner, I believe, was the Nazi I responded to recently. And she was also making the whole connection to the trans people and Nazis and they're controlling our language and everything like that. It's just if you actually understand the stuff, no, we're not. We're actually creating more words. We're not taking any words away. No words have been banned. Yeah, if you say certain words in certain context, people are going to judge you. That is not newspeak. That's just called society. You have the right to say something, and I have the right to judge you for it.
That's just called words mean things.
Yeah.
But what really annoys me is in her manifesto, she says to stop saying certain, stop saying the newspeak words. It's the point of newspeak is that there are fewer words.
Yeah.
It's fewer words so that you can't communicate certain concepts, like trans people existing.
Yeah. That's the thing. It's projection on their part because they have to frame themselves as the small fighting the outsider. It's a theme not just shared by fascism, but Christian theology. You've seen the couple of mentions of God's order and everything like that. That is also coming through here. There's the whole notion of Christian persecution. We are the majority of people in America. We have every institution under our wing. We have all the holidays are based around our calendar and all this crap. But somehow, because someone said happy holiday, it's just over. This is not this Christian nation has fallen. We've been taken over. We are being, subjugated. And it's this ridiculous fucking projection. Then we have, quote, quote, "Joe Biden put a paedophile monster in charge of health and human services so that the process of trapping your children with that lifetime commitment to pharmaceuticals can be honed even further into the path of least resistance." End quote. Quote, I thought pedos got the wool. I thought Como's got the rope. End quote. Quote, your fear of the truth has shoveled thousands of children down the hole in Buffalo Bill's basement so he can harvest them for their skins. End quote. That particular one there shows that, like, the whole notion that, like, Buffalo Bill isn't harmful to the trans community and this sort of shit is just, like, baseless. Because, again, transphobes, that's how they see trans women, Buffalo Bill, you know? So, again, this sort of crying about paedophilia is constant throughout the manifesto, as one would come to expect at this point. And
I don't think there's a single time in the manifesto where she refers to trans women without also calling them pedophiles.
And it is, of course, one of those things that, like, the moment you label a LGBT plus person a pedophile, like, the deck's stacked against them. Because of how society still views us, you know. We had the whole teacher scares, and, like, you have the old 60s black and white, like, PSAs at the cinema. We will now talk about the homosexual predator who, like, stalks the, you know, suburban area after your children. You know, that's part of the history that has institutional weight for so fucking long. It's just ridiculous. But yeah. Is there anything else you'd like to say about the paedophilia stuff? Because it adds the whole trans misogynistic reservoir. It's generally what I call it, is this whole notion that trans women are dangerous and trans femme folk are dangerous. Anyone assigned male at birth is dangerous in a way that is never applied to cis men. I must make that clear as well. Because, like, you listen to, like, gender critical people go, I've got a daughter, and, like, I don't trust a trans woman around them because, you know, the trans woman genes make every single one of them a child raping, like, thing. Yeah. And then in the same breath they'll say trans women aren't real women, they're men because of their genes. It's like, hang on a second, what happens if we connect those two? But they don't care about that because it's not rational, it's not reasonable, it's fascism. Fascism doesn't have a desire to be reasonable or rational.
That's actually something I really hated, like, all the way back reading the BBC article, there was this whole thing of, like, oh, if even one woman is too many. And it's like, where is this energy when it comes to cis men, powerful cis men, who abuse, like, multiple cis women, who abuse multiple children, who we know they do this. We know it's a systemic issue. We have so much data on this. It's not just one fucking 80-person survey of transphobes. Like, we have actual proper data and actual proper theories about this.
We're discussing the manifesto of a serial rapist right now.
Yeah, but it's just like the thing of, there's that hatred of trans women, but that energy is never applied to cis men, even though, like, cis men actually do this. Not all of them, but, you know, like, it's a very pervasive problem.
It's almost like they have the institutional power trans women don't have. You know, it's almost like they can sexually assault people and become presidents. I mean, just look at the last two presidents, you know, Trump and the current one. You know, it really is just, yeah, it is like trans women don't have that fucking power.
Actually, I guess one thing about the manifesto is I noticed that it was very strange, and something I really had a hard time trying to figure out where she was going was, half the time cis men she seemed to be talking about, like, they were really misogynistic, but then the other half of the time she was talking about them, like, they're really good. And, like, I was like, oh, they all agree with us.
I've talked to sailors and Marines, and, you know, they none of them, like, you know, accept that a trans woman is a woman. It's like, porn searchers will tell you otherwise. But
it's just, she just could not decide. It is very much the same thing we've been seeing from gender criticals this whole time, where it's like there's a problem with women being oppressed by men, but all of the cis men who hate trans people, they're all wonderful. Even the ones who we know have committed violence against women.
Oh shit, that's something that I totally forgot about. I meant to put a note in it about the one trans person that she celebrates is, of course, none other than fucking Buck Angel, who, for those who don't know, is a known domestic abuser. Um, you know, so it's fucking amazing. Like, the one trans person she fucking celebrates is Buck Angel, who, of course, outed Lana Wachowski and continued to try and target his ex-wife for the next 11 years. Yes, from 2003 to 2014, I believe. Uh, and it's just amazing that, again, like, of course, she constantly misgenders Buck Angel and like talks about the whole self-hatred thing, and that's why she loves Buck Angel, because of this whole self-hatred thing. But it just, yeah, I'm sorry, I just remembered that point. I just wanted to get that out there. I didn't mean to derail you.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh no, that's completely fine. I was done anyway.
Oh, okay.
The only other thing I guess I can think to add is other than the quotes you suggested I take down, is I noticed a very like fascist like anti, not exclusively anti-Semitic, but very common in anti-Semitism trope. I'm not sure if it makes sense to mention it now, or if I should have slotted it in before. I'm very lost. But basically, like the she kept complaining about how trans women are these weak, like shameful men, and like this very much this hating of them for not living up to masculine ideals. But then at the same time, the whole point is that they're this dangerous threat.
That's going to come up next in the anti-Semitism,
society.
Actually.
Okay, so we're thinking on
it's just the posturing in regards to like white supremacy, because gender criticals in like it's let's be clear, it's not a case of gender criticals have like merged with fascists over the time. As we see, the people who are like siding with gender critical have always had anti-Semitic views. J.K. Rowling. So it's a case of their views align and come together. I've got a bunch of quotes here. There will be some that deal with the power difference, which we'll come to in a second. But the first one here is, quote, "When Mitchfest fell, so fell Western civilization," end quote. Quote, "Take the culture back, or the dogs will be all that survives of Western civilization," end quote. Here's the big one, and again, anti-Semitism. Quote, "This is your great replacement, bitch. These people castrate your kids. They sold them to Big Pharma to be castrated while you cheer them on for living their truth," end quote. Let's skip over one because there's one at the end I want to talk about here as well. Quote, "The evil trannies are 1% of the population. They control the matrix. They do not control real life," end quote. Actually, there is actually a point to that one as well, sorry. Quote, "These people understand attention. Attention is the currency of your horrifying society. Teenage girls want attention more than anything else on earth. They have been offered a choice between mincing TikTok whore and navel-gazing, spoiled, rotten, weak, pathetic, fake man victims because you sold them out for the smartphone. Trans women and the shadow lords of the algorithm control this attention," end quote. So there we see the whole they control the metrics. Trans women and the shadow lords of the algorithm, the great replacement, the cries of the fall of Western civilization. These are all anti-Semitic dog whistles, which of course relies on the whole Nazi ideology that whilst the Jew is weaker than the Aryan, the Jews still have amassed this cultural control where they puppet everything. That's why the Nazis believed they'd lost the First World War, because the Jews had weakened their people, and that they would do the same in the Second World War unless immediate action was taken. And I know that's a simplification. It does go back much further. We, of course, had Martin Luther, not the American King Jr., Martin Luther, the Protestant Reformationist. his work on demonizing the Jews was the template for Kristallnacht. Um, you know, but again, Nazi ideology is rooted in this belief that they are both simultaneously the perfect people, society, strength, endurance, perfect masculinity and femininity and all this, but at the same time, they are in a weakened state. They have been brought to their knees by some shadowy organization, a cabal working in the background, and that is, of course, the Jewish state in their eyes. This is what David Icke refers to as like the reptilians. The whole notion that there's a secret society controlling everything. It's wrapped up in the whole like Illuminati conspiracies. There's just lots of ways that it has been repackaged. I see Higgins has heard me fuck up my pronunciation.
2d4 psychic damage.
2d4 psychic damage. But like, it is always rooted in this paradoxical state of we are the strongest, but also the weakest. And again, that has been recycled because it is one and the same here. They've just dragged trans people into it. When they say Big Pharma, the reason I kept bringing up Big Pharma is because there's a belief that Jewish people control all of the drugs in the world, all of the pharmacies, and it's them. They're the ones pushing to trans our daughters, to weaken the Western civilization and bring it to its knees again. That's the belief there. That's what Cade means by the shadow laws. She just means Jew. That's what she means there. But yes, if you want to talk more about like the whole power dynamic and everything, I don't know if there's much you want to add there.
Apparently, I just want to just correct Higgins on something minor. I think you'll find that she's actually half Dutch and half British, not German.
Yeah, I'm not German.
I'm a terrible person.
I'm safe.
But yeah, I am not. I just got a DM of like, holy fuck, I control the pharmacy. There are so many jokes I could make because this friend of mine is on a lot of pills. You wanted me to add something about a thing.
If you want to, I don't know if I covered like this weird power thing that they have going on. The whole we're simultaneously stronger than you but weaker than you.
I mean, that's really all there is to it. Is the enemy is simultaneously too weak to be worthy to rule, but also strong enough to destroy everything, and it makes no sense at all. But it's that thing of needing like a strong enemy to feel threatened by, but also a weak enemy to feel superior.
They have to present themselves as David, in the David and Goliath dynamic. They have to present themselves as the underdog. Otherwise, someone will just realize they're just fucking fascists. I see we have been joined by a friend, the Graceful Gamer. Hello. But yes, I'm trying to think, is there anything else I want to add here? But again, as we've seen, like gender critical movement is just it's just saturated with white nationalists like Stephen Yexi Lennon. They've also like promoted like outright Holocaust deniers. But interestingly, they also exploit the Nazi imagery stuff as well. I dealt with that in relation to Graham Linehan recently, and like how he went on to talk about like trans youth receiving fully reversible puberty blockers with absolutely no side effects is the equivalent of Nazis experimenting on children in concentration camps, and it's just absolutely fucking horrific. Again, it's all related to this like lost lesbian, lost daughters shtick they've got going. But yes, there's also just a unhealthy focus on the Wachowski sisters and like the Matrix as well. And it's really strange how like the Matrix is like discussed throughout the article. But again, I should note, of course, in the same way that I note that Fallon Fox is black, the Wachowski sisters are Jewish as well. So like they've kind of become, especially as Hollywood elite, which is another euphemism, which just means Jew in a lot of places. Again, that's just a way for them to sort of like see how scary all this is. You know, that there's a masked boogeyman coming for you, sort of thing. But yeah, I'm just trying to think now. There's something else. Like, by the way, I just want to be clear also, like, I know I talk about the Wachowski sisters and everything. I don't want to present them as heroes because there are criticisms to be had of the Wachowski sisters. Like, of course, you can criticize their work and all that, but there's also a discussion, like, black people are having about, like, cultural appropriation in regards to one of the Wachowski sisters. I've forgotten which one it is that has the matted hair, that's supposed to be dreadlocks. Like, there's genuine criticisms to be had there. They're part of a secret Jewish state, not part of the actual criticism. That's just Nazi foghorn, okay? But yeah. Okay, and that is that. Oh no, we got the attacks on trans men throughout the article. I believe you've actually got 12 quotes, so you've got more quotes than I do. So if you want to take this section, the mic is yours.
Yeah. Sorry, one sec. I really should just like go on Do Not Disturb mode on Discord during streams, but then like people actually contact me through Discord instead of the chat. So, but yes, I went through and I found all of the anti-trans mass dog whistles. Well, okay, if I could have made an argument for including every single mention of children, because as we discussed before, usually the moral panic over the welfare of the children is specifically about the quote-unquote girls.
They sometimes mention boys as like an afterthought. There's even like a sentence, a very specific sentence in there that I noticed where it's like she meant like Lily Cade mentions the girls and like and later on she mentions the boys. Like they are. Sorry.
Yeah, but I decided to be a bit more conservative and managed to chop it down to 12 quotes in the manifesto. So I guess I'll just start reading those. Quote, I would send my daughter to learn what a golden shower is from Max Hardcore before I sent these satanic tranny freaks, before I let these satanic tranny freaks educate her about her body and her soul, end quote. I'm sorry, that was terrible. Quote, your children are mutilating their bodies to please them. These people understand attention. Attention is the currency of your horrifying society. Teenage girls want attention more than anything else on earth. End quote. Quote, they have infiltrated every level of your society with one goal: degrade women. Piss on the faces of your mothers, your daughters, the women who fought to get you here. Piss on your right to say no. Cut your breasts off, sew your pussies shut. Take the word mother. How the fuck dare you let the actually faggots take the word mother from you? Attacks on quite a lot of different things that the trans masks, AFAB, binary folks, etc. do. Quote, I know what a woman is, bitch, and I know what a man is, and I know what a mother is, and I know what a child is, end quote. Quote, these tranny freaks are experimenting on your children and cutting them apart in full view of the public, and you stand by and let it happen because you are worried they will call you out for being afraid of them, end quote. Quote, sorry.
There's nothing to be sorry about. I know it's a lot.
Yeah, no, that one I was just trying to like, I was like, oh, this only mentions children, and I realized, right, the whole cutting them apart in full view. Like, technically, you could say it's about all trans kids, but like, I think this is the ghost boobs. Quote, every fucking teenage girl experiences dysphoria, end quote. Quote, you have allowed the worst people in your society to educate your daughters about, I don't know what I did with that one, but you know, daughters being educated, that's a dog whistle. Quote, your children who agree to be mutilated for the attention of the cult are weak, end quote. And of course, this does just say children, but because it's about attention, she established earlier in the manifesto that trans men just transition for attention. Non-binary folk who are AFAB just do it for attention. Quote, you trust your children to the smartphone and this is what it did to you, end quote. Again, going back on pre-established thing of like, they do it for attention, the internet trans them. Quote, 12-year-old...
Rapid onset gender dysphoria is the,
yeah.
What's the best term? Yeah, it's like...
quote, 12-year-old girls experiencing the normal rhythms of the experience of being 12-year-old girls are encouraged to mutilate their growing bodies to please these pedophiles because it gets attention, end quote. And quote, to break me and others like me, they raped and groomed and tortured and sliced up and desecrated and educated your daughters, end quote. And finally, quote, I'm here to take the language back from the forked tongue of Newspeak and save your daughters, end quote. So basically, anytime they mention daughters, anytime they mention girls, anytime they mention mothers, taking the word mother away, these are all dog whistles against trans men, trans masks, non-binary folk who are AFAB. Yeah. It's all through the manifesto. But
sadly, by the way, I have a section in my original script where I talked about the attacks on trans men, the sexualization of trans boys, and this whole phantom breast thing. That's why I had everything to go, and I just took from that script in the third section that we did. I was going to talk about this then, but then I was online, of course, last night, and some of you might have seen this, and just completely unprovoked. In general, people have just been talking about, hey, there is a lot of fucking terrible shit. There's just fucking anti, trans woman terrorism, this trans misogynistic terrorism in this. But then other people have been talking about the facts that this is trying to argue to strip trans men and trans boys of their medical and sexual autonomy to preserve them as a sexual resource and all this. So people are doing that in general, but sadly there have been certain individuals who've been this is only about trans women, and I ended up getting in a bit of a clash over that, because it's just kind of fucking annoying how you're missing half the conversation, and I should really read out the thing that I put it so nicely in one of my posts that I really should just find that. It was the one that I mentioned, my friend. If I can find that, yeah. Quote, a friend once explained to me that, as a community, we're very good at recognizing that when trans folks say dangerous men, they mean trans women existing, but are shit at realizing vulnerable girls is code for trans men with autonomy using it in a way I don't like. By the way, when I say that we're very good at recognizing internally as a community, I don't necessarily mean we're very good at acting on it. Acting and recognizing are two very different things. But when someone reads a transphobic manifesto about how trans women are dangerous, and they see dangerous men, generally they do understand what that means. I don't really have difficulty explaining that to people. But when they see vulnerable girls, they respond as if we are talking about vulnerable girls when we're not talking about vulnerable girls. There's never been shown to be some epidemic of vulnerable girls out there. It is trans boys, trans men. That's what the whole Tavistock versus Bell was about. Trans boys who are actually teenage girls that have been convinced by rapid onset gender dysphoria that they must mutilate themselves and stuff like that. That's what it was about.
That's the thing, is as a community, there are people in the community who don't respect trans misogyny. There are problems with that. There are problems with people not taking it seriously. And I'll admit that I've noticed lately with some of the things Ethel and I've been working on, not that I don't care about trans misogyny or anything, but just I don't always understand
or realize how
bad it is. Sometimes I just don't take the time to think because I'm just really exhausted all the time with being expected to put so much energy into so many things. I kind of get numb to things, and it's not until I see Ethel really freaking out that I realize, I have to really, yeah. Right. So I am also included in that group of not always taking trans misogyny seriously. But when it comes to just understanding the concepts and just being able to have that conversation, it's really, really easy. Whenever a TERF talks about predatory men, it's so easy for people. It's like we have a browser extension that just replaces predatory men with trans women. Like people get it immediately.
Mm-hmm.
But whenever the TERFs are talking about vulnerable girls, people are like, oh, the detransitioners and people who aren't sure and people who are, and it's like, no, they're like, they are exclusively talking about trans. Like statistically, there's one girl who's actually just a vulnerable girl,
Mm-hmm.
but they are. It is exactly the same thing where it's all trans men, trans masks, non-binary people who are AFAB that they're talking about.
And it's also important to take things in the context of Lily Cade here. And like, when I was pointing out the facts that what this article was also doing, as well as lynching and like promoting terrorism against trans women, was calling for trans men and AFAB MB folk to be stripped of their medical and sexual autonomy, is the facts that we saw earlier. How Lily reacts to what she sees as people making a move on what she believes is rightfully hers. She will physically assault people over that, you know. And if you think the assault only happens to like outsiders who come in, that's not fucking true. We know she rapes people. So, you know, she is fighting to preserve what she perceives as her sexual stock from outsiders. You know, that sexual violence is going to be directed at trans men and MB folk as well. Make no fucking mistake or illusion about that. Yeah, sorry.
The thing that really annoys me, like the thing that really made me angry when I saw this was, especially, well, so when Ethel jumped in and was like, hey, maybe don't trivialize and dismiss violence against trans men for no reason. Trans fans showed up to get angry and say, how dare you, AFAB person, center yourself,
I was like,
and then get angry.
They said it was like a patronizing apology, you know. Oh, I'm so sorry, you know, AFAB person, for centering myself on lynchings and stuff. It's like, here's the thing, I never said don't center yourself. I've actually stated the exact opposite. Concentrate on what you need to right now. The thing is, this original post was not about someone centering the struggles of trans women. It was her saying, psst, this article is only like targeting, you know, trans women. Like that's unnecessary provocation. Just leave the trans men and those who want to cover both sides of the issue the fuck alone. You know, people have been pretending like this is the same as, say, a cis man turning up at a conversation about violence against women and going, well, what about the men? And that's just not the case. People were having their own conversations, you know. Again, in my script, completely unprompted. You hadn't even read that part of the script before we're doing this stream. You know, I had included this because I wanted to talk about it because it was important to me to note the full extent of the violence, you know. We are doing this of our own prerogative. And then this other person's coming along and going, no, you can't do that. You know,
it has to only be about trans women.
You're taking the mic away from me by using your own microphone to talk about all of the issues that impact you. But yeah.
But what really made me angry was that there was that as well. So there was that. There was trans femmes showing up and then getting angry at Ethel for acknowledging the issue and also not conforming to the expectations of being an evil trans man, trying to make everything about themselves. But then trans men were also showing up and saying, how dare, as a trans man, I don't think this is a big deal. How dare you? How dare you say this is a big deal? It can only be about trans women. And the reason why this annoys me, the reason why this makes me really angry isn't because I'm like, oh, no, trans men don't get a voice. Like going into this, when I woke up this morning, when I saw how upset Ethel was, I'm like, okay, this is a situation where we can worry about trans men later. We need to support trans femmes. And I was completely fine with that. And that was the approach I was going for.
Yeah.
But the thing is, the violence against trans men in the manifesto and in gender critical ideology is not a separate issue from trans misogyny. The trans misogyny of TERFs relies on the subjugation of trans men.
Yeah.
When you undermine the fact that the trans men are subjugated and that trans masks and non-binary folk who are AFAB are subjugated, you are undermining your own analysis. Because the whole thing is that trans women are dangerous and predatory. And in order to have dangerous predatory people we need to attack, you need to have a vulnerable victim class to defend from them. And the way that TERFs justify this vulnerable victim class is they buy into this idea that everyone who is assigned female at birth is vulnerable and cannot be trusted. And like the second, here's the thing, is they're making up bullshit. They can make up whatever bullshit they want. They don't have to go with this idea that trans men are not real and are just confused, lost lesbians. They could make up a thing about how like trans men are these depraved women who want male privilege and the power that comes with it and seek to dominate other women. They could do that.
Yeah.
But what happens if they do that?
Mm-hmm.
Well, first of all, they have to admit that not all AFABs are vulnerable. They have to admit that they can have power. They can, hold their own against men. They have to, like, they lose a lot of the vulnerability of their constructed victim class. They have to admit that AFABs can hurt each other. Mm-hmm. And then they lose this whole idea of, if we just keep out all the trans women, then cis women will be safe. I know they make it harder to claim that AFABs are a homogenous group. When feminists call them out on their shit, they have a harder time dismissing them. Mm-hmm. They have a harder time trying to convince cis women that just if all the cis women stick together, then that will make everything perfect. They have a harder time claiming the silent majority. Yeah. They lose a lot. Their rhetoric loses a lot of its power if they do that.
The whole basis of like we're protecting these people when you're actually encouraging medical and sexual violence against them. Like we're just conceding the point by leaving the conversation out. We concede the point. We give them credibility. We give them legitimacy by doing that. And no, again, I need to be clear about this. I'm not stating that trans femme people should be out there like campaigning on this right now because you've got your own shit to deal with. Deal with your own shit. That was never the issue. I didn't say anything on this issue until someone else came along and started attacking those who were critiquing, the aspects that do impact trans men. It's just it's interesting how everyone kept flipping it around and like saying that you're coming out here. It's like, no, I'm responding to someone telling trans men and people who are talking about the issues that trans men suffer to effectively shut the hell up. And
it's very strange as well. Like even after you said you were trans femme, mm-hmm. they were still treating you like this, selfish man trying to make everything about men.
I've got the quote here actually from that thread if you want me to read it out quickly.
Yeah, sure.
So I first of all, this is a response to someone else. I content warnings for sexual assault and violation of medical autonomy because you see why. Quote, what you are defining strictly as sexual harassment includes both rape and the complete removal of medical autonomy. What's more is the OP was not trans women have it worse, but that this is only/mostly about trans women, end quote. And then this other person was the one who turned up and went, quote, I'm so sorry for centering myself in the discussion of a letter calling for my murder and the genocide of everyone like me. Truly, this is about you this time. I'm so sorry, you noble AFAB. Please accept my humble apology, end quote. To which my response was, quote, I'm AMAB. So A, stop lying about me, and B, stop lying about my position. I never said you cannot censor yourself. That's not what the OP did. She decided to go after people, unprovoked, for discussing how Cade is trying to strip trans men of sexual and medical autonomy, end quote. Their response to this, quote, fuck you, end quote. That's literally, yeah.
Yep.
I
just, like, especially when like trans men were showing and be like, oh, I'm so wonderful to trans women. Look at me invalidate myself. And like, you are not helping trans. You are making things worse for everyone. Like we talked about Belle v. Tavistock.
Yeah.
Okay. When trans men get stripped of their medical autonomy, that does not just affect it affects everyone. And like we had an attempted genocide over this once already.
Yeah.
Of trans children, and people are still not taking it seriously. if you don't care about trans men, fine. I'm not prepared to argue with you on that. I'm not prepared to look like a bad person. I'm not prepared to have people fucking call me an MRA. I don't care if you don't care about trans men, but this affects the entire community. Like these attacks, they are so much more dangerous than calls to violence because they are more palatable.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they look very civil and nice and clean, and there's no one sees the blood. It's all settled in a courtroom. You know, they're much easier for one or two cis people to, like, if you want to harm a whole country of trans people, you got to get a lot of cis people on board for that, to do that with physical violence. But for stripping trans people of medical autonomy, all it took for Bell v. Tavistock was two fucking people going to court.
One was a mother of a trans child who wouldn't even see medical care until they were over the age of full medical consent. The other was an adult who transitioned in adulthood. You know,
two people who were not even affected by the case brought about an attempted genocide of all the trans children in an entire country because we are not taking this seriously.
And it's another issue that it will cause impacts is, there was a quote here that actually I've missed. I've got to find it. It's the one about the gym. Right, okay. This is actually a quote you missed here, actually. This is just kind of a strange thing that I noticed. Quote, "The cure is acceptance and spiritual growth, a fucking gym routine, hobbies, goals, not bullshit personas, lies, a lifetime of commitment to pharmaceuticals, hack job surgeries, the construct of vile funhouse mirror effigy of the opposite sex from the bodies honed by millions of years of evolution that you have allowed the worst people in society to educate your daughters about." End quote. All the bullshit they're listing at the start, I did find it, like, as tragic as everything is, just the mention of, like, gym, it really reminds me of that, like, toxic positivity in white women healer circles that you might have seen, that, like, you don't need your bipolar meds, you just need to go for a gym, like, go to the gym. There's that, but there's also the fact that the cure, who's the focus of conversion efforts when it comes to gender? It's not, you know, trans girls. Again, they don't give a shit about trans girls. They do talk more about conversion therapy for adult trans women as, like, fixing the sexual predator. But when it comes to children, conversion therapy efforts, again, ostensibly focus on trans boys. You know? And again, that's just another thing that just, like, it's like, it takes nothing to expand your knowledge and to acknowledge the complexities here and what is at stake and how the harm is being done. Okay? We are not advocating trans femme people focus on these issues. Again, you've got your own shit. But why are you taking time out of the important stuff you're doing to go after people who are, you know, who are talking about these issues?
It just makes me, like, so fucking angry.
It's like the person running out of the heart attack conference, charging into the cancer conference and screaming, "You lot aren't dealing with heart attacks," you know. Like, you should be dealing with that instead. And it's just, yeah. Sorry.
It just makes me so fucking angry because, like, we're currently dealing with a tragedy. The trans community is in pain, and the people who are most affected, like, I can't speak for all trans men, but I've been trying to help. And instead, we have to deal with this bullshit where people have decided that invalidating trans men at the expense of understanding what is happening to you is more important, because they would rather, like, we have this idea that caring about what happens to trans men is like letting the patriarchy win or whatever. It's anti-feminist, and it's like a real girl boss move to dismiss and invalidate trans men. And it's at the point where people are, like, not allowed to talk about what is happening and not wanting to understand it, and are at each other's fucking throats rather than trying to address the issue.
The gender critical movement is relying on a pincer move. It's attacking us on two fronts. We are only covering one of those fronts.
And here's the thing. This is what they want. Like, part of the reason they fucking do this, part of the reason they go so hard on trans femmes and only trans femmes is, I don't know if they're doing this intentionally, but it certainly has this effect of building up a fuck ton of resentment in the trans community. And now we're at each other's throats. It is a divide and conquer strategy.
Yeah. And like, it is possible to get over that. Like, when I was writing the video, I honestly didn't know, like, I talked to you about it, and I knew that there were people who had issues with this, but I was like, would my subscribers really need this information? I was, like, contemplating, should I really include it? Am I just adding paragraphs for, like, little reason? I decided, actually, it's important. Reiterate it, make sure people have this information. But then, like, just the last few days, it's just been, why? And here's the thing. I'm not someone who's shying away from calling what Lily Cade has done terrorism. I'm not shying away from that. It's terrorism against trans women. It is trans misogynistic terrorism. I'm not putting any hedge on that. Stochastic, borderline, fuck that shit. It's just terrorism. Just call it what it is. It's just part of the gender critical manifesto. It's what they've been working towards all these years. But at the same time, I don't like the idea of turning a blind eye to conversion efforts and people being stripped of medical and sexual autonomy, and also by doing that, by turning away, I should apologize. I think I said turn a blind eye, and I shouldn't have done that. That was ableist of me. I do apologize there. But by doing that, by looking away, that just gives them the narrative. That just helps them. But yeah, is there anything else you really want to talk about? Sorry.
I feel like I had something, but it's just...
Yeah. Which kind of brings me to like the last sort of section of this video, which I'm going to give the content warning again for, because I might actually cut this section out, and I might upload it as a separate thing. Excuse me. So for that, content warning for transphobia, homophobia, lesbophobia, biphobia, racism, anti-Semitism, rape and sexual assault, domestic abuse, desexualization of minors, terrorism, and white nationalism.
And now that you said all of that, I did actually think of a
then
point.
go back. Don't worry, I can come back to this later. Do yours first. Sorry.
I'm sorry. So like I kind of like touched on this in the thread I did on Twitter. But like when it comes to these situations where people feel like there's too much focus on trans men, and like something needs to be done about it, instead of tearing like trans men, trans masks, etc. down, how about positive calls to action? Just say, hey, trans femmes are suffering a lot right now. Like reach out, support, check on the ones etc. Instead of trying to say how dare you talk about trans, like if trans men are really talking too much about ourselves, you can just ignore it.
You can talk
like
more
it's
on
fine.
Your side.
Just ignore it, talk more on your side, boost the stuff that you think is important. Calls to positive action are a wonderful thing. But also I also want to say like that there's this stigma against listening to trans men and trans masks, because there's this idea of there's this very ciscentric idea of men don't know anything. Men don't understand oppression, and like no, like I said before, I've dealt with growing up. I've dealt with being treated like property, like reproductive property, since I was a little kid, since I was 9 years old. I've dealt with misogyny. I've dealt with, thinking about, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a scientist. And one of the reasons I wanted to do that was honestly just the challenge of making it as a woman scientist and proving that women could do that. And I think a lot of trans masks identify with that idea of wanting to do things that society says women can't do just to prove that women can. And that's actually a very painful thing that a lot of us go through, is realizing we can't do that, having to find other ways to be feminists. Like trans men are not cis men, believe it or not. Yeah. We know a lot about misogyny, and we know a lot about patriarchy. And there are things that we notice that trans femmes don't because our experiences are different. There are blind spots. We both have blind spots. There are things about trans misogyny that trans masks are not going to notice. There are things about certain aspects of misogyny that trans femmes aren't going to notice because you don't have those experiences. And I think that some of the trans femmes I've spoken to may be able to back me up on this. In the conversations we had, there are things that I will mention that like, oh, I didn't know that. So we need to listen to each other. It can't all be one-sided. Please listen to trans men, not because we need a seat at the table. We need to make everything about us, but because we have insights that are important to the whole community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like another thing we've got to think about is like some trans men have experience of the gender critical movement. As mentioned earlier, the gender critical movement does actually groom people. We have evidence of this. And how they groom people as well. This isn't there's some evil organization out there. This is people are like trading in relationships and sex and stuff and trying to encourage, people who at the time think they're lesbians but then later come out as like trans masks. It's just like there's so much to gain here. And again, nobody is telling any trans femme person not to talk about what currently impacts them, not to center themselves right now. That's not what we're doing. And the fact that I have to, as a trans femme person, keep repeating that kind of shows like how it's just like kind of etched its way into me that I feel like I have to constantly qualify everything I have to say.
Oh, thank fuck! I am not the only one.
And here's the scary thing. The other times I have to fucking qualify everything I say is when I'm scared of like being attacked with trans misogyny, being too aggressive, being too violent, being too forward, that's the other time. So as a trans femme person, like feeling I have to qualify everything I say when discussing, the issues trans men face and MB folk who are assigned female birth. It's not a nice feeling. It's just an extension of the same fucking anxiety and trauma there. I just wish it wasn't a fucking issue. But yeah.
Every time we talk about something like this, no, like you don't have to be sorry. But I do want to like add just my own experience as well. Is that feeling of having to qualify everything? That feeling of having to constantly prove that I'm not a trans misogynist, because that is kind of like the default assumption for trans men. That kind of sounds like a parallel to like being assumed to be I guess a predator if you're a trans woman. And like obviously it's not the same thing, but it does really hurt being assumed to be a bigot just because of who you are. And having to constantly try to prove that, and like it doesn't matter how much I do, it doesn't matter how much work I do here on like streams that are exclusively about trans femmes and their issues. It doesn't matter how many videos I make of my own supporting like women with all kinds of gender histories. That would be the default assumption. I've had every single time I've criticized a trans woman and she's responded, she has used the fact that I am a man to claim that I'm being trans misogynistic. Like not he was trans misogynistic, he said and did this, but just like, oh, he's a man. He's a trans man.
We saw that with like how the person didn't know my gender and just assumed that like, oh, you must be AFAB. I was like, no.
Yeah. And like there's also just this constant guilt. Like I had really not planned to talk about this issue this much, because I'm convinced that if I do, that is me hurting trans femmes.
It doesn't subtract anything. Like there's a sickening notion that like oppression is a pie and like everyone has a piece of the pie. That's not how it works. It's the same issue we used to have with equality, with like, oh, like there's only so much equality to go around. Don't take too much equality. And it's like, oh, there's only so much oppression to go around. Don't take too much of the oppression. It's like, can a person really take too? Like, okay, a group can come to dominate a conversation. See, white women versus like the struggles that black women face, the complete erasure of black men's struggles, you know. But that's not what's fucking happening here. Like, again, I have not seen the same fucking bullshit of like the way that cis men turn up at posts about violence against women going, what about men? You know, I that's not what we're seeing here. People, you know, talk
See,
about
here's the
how things
thing.
impacted them. I talk about how, as broad as I fucking can, because I try to do that, you know. That's why I'm like going out of the way. The Wachowski sisters are Jewish, so like the anti-Semitism there's going to hurt them more. Fallon Fox is black, so like the whole call to lynch, etc. There's a racist element there as well. Like I try to do that.
Like, here's the thing: is I legitimately thought that there were like trans men showing up and saying, "What about trans men?"
There
And
probably
I
are
just haven't
somewhere.
seen
Like
it.
there probably are somewhere. Like I need to. That's the thing.
Statistically,
I need to qualify here again. Like when again, just like the whole thing, there probably like statistically speaking, there's going to be a trans person out there who uses their trans status to try and pressure someone into having sex. That's going to happen statistically. The whole gold star lesbian thing is predicated around that. Like, you know, but yeah.
but like just from the way people talk about this, I'm convinced that like I get the impression that there's a whole bunch of trans men out there who are behaving absolutely horribly and going around to like to trans women and harassing them and saying, why aren't you talking about trans men more? How dare you? This has to be all about me. Like, that's the way people talk about it. And like the constant thing of trans men have problems with trans misogyny, trans men don't want to be held accountable. And I don't doubt that that does happen. And I've been told by trans femmes I trust that there are issues there. But like I have no idea what the scale is like, because it's only ever just the claims that it happens. I never actually see the context. I never actually see the I never actually see examples. And it's gotten to the point where I just don't know what is happening. And I'm just constantly I don't trust what's going on, but I just assume that trans men are always in the wrong. It's just it's a whole thing. I should probably stop. I'm getting myself started. But just
Yeah. Final section, because again, I might cut the section out and post it as its own little thing at the weekend. There probably won't be a video this weekend. I was supposed to record it today, but then like the emergency stream came along and we've been broadcasting for a few hours and it'll be days soon, so that's gone down. Content warning for the following: transphobia, homophobia, lesbophobia, biphobia, racism, anti-Semitism, rape and sexual assault, domestic abuse, the sexualization of minors, terrorism, white nationalism, and suicide. Self-harming and suicide. That's one thing I actually forgot to add. So it's great that I actually added this here, because I can say self-harm and suicide. So if that's an issue that affects you, please don't stick around if it's too much for you right now. So again, I'll just read that out. Content warning: transphobia, homophobia, lesbophobia, biphobia, racism, anti-Semitism, rape and sexual assault, domestic abuse, sexualization of minors, terrorism, white nationalism, and self-harm and suicide. There is one part of the article which really piqued my interest, and that was, quote, "They threatened suicide and you rolled over," end quote. And the reason this piqued my interest is this is a very signature move by a one Rose of Dawn. I've actually gone ahead and in the transcript you will see a link to a timestamped response to Rose of Dawn, in which I actually explore this issue, because Rose of Dawn calls this the abuser's narrative. Now, what is the abuser's narrative? Okay, well, in domestic situations, and indeed in all situations actually, a power move that abusive people can do in order to avoid accountability is use the threat of self-harm or suicide to avoid that accountability. That accountability can be anything from someone reporting their actions, someone going public, someone leaving their domestically abusive partner, etc. If you leave me, if you talk about this, I will commit suicide. That is an abusive narrative. What is not an abusive narrative is recognizing that certain social institutions and the changes made to them will have an impact on the well-being of entire demographics and can result in those demographics having higher rates of attempted suicide. Rosa Dawn likes to conflate the two. In the video I'm talking about, it is a video covering her lies in relation to the Tavistock v. Bell case. She goes on the facts that Mermaids, which is an LGBT plus support charity, pointed out the facts that removing medical, like Gillett competence for minors and also medical autonomy for under 18s. Reminder that in the UK, 16 is the age of full medical consent. So by declaring trans people couldn't medically transition until they were 18, trans people had been legally declared as second-class citizens in the exact same vein as was once the case in relation to sexual consent. For those who don't know, in the UK, sexual consent for gay men used to be 21, it then became 18 and was finally equalized to 16. So in the exact same way, they had been declared second-class citizens. I have a video, it is an hour long, correcting all of the lies Rosa Dawn made, because she makes so many lies. It is her career. That's how she bolsters herself. And part of it is this conflation between, pointing out the facts that when they are denied essential, life-saving healthcare, trans people's attempted suicide rates increase. That is not the same as an abuser saying, if you attempt to hold me accountable, I am going to harm myself. This is about their autonomy, not yours. An abuser uses the threat of suicide to control your autonomy as the victim. What Mermaids and other groups are doing, and what is being referenced here, is the facts that if you strip young trans people of their autonomy, they feel hopeless and there is nothing they can do. Okay? You would not say, if a victim of domestic abuse came out and said, I just felt so hopeless, I tried taking my own life, you would not say that is domestic abuse. You would acknowledge the facts that they are in an abusive situation, they are the one who have had the control taken away from them, they are doing the last thing. They can't control their life, so they can at least control their death. Okay? That is one of the bases upon which a person will attempt suicide. This trying to recapture control. Okay? That's the difference here. People like Rosa Dawn completely lie about that. Which is interesting, considering my first interaction with Rosa Dawn is her promoting someone who used self-harm to escape me criticizing them. After they spent 3 months harassing me, violating my block of them, I criticized them and said I would not apologize for pointing out their abject transphobia, and then they made the power move because I was holding them accountable. Rosa Dawn rode in and supported them. So it's really interesting to see how Rosa Dawn does this. Of course, Rosa Dawn was part of the BBC article and has been promoting it and continuing to promote it even as Lily Cade's history of sexual violence became widespread and well known. And she has continued to do that. She has continued to defend the serial rapist even after the threats of lynching have come out. And I need to stress this. I have the actual quote. There is a link to an archive copy. I haven't actually put the link there. I'll put that there later. She has stated, quote, "The following two statements can be true at the same time. Lily Cade is unhinged, has called for the deaths of trans women, and has also faced accusations of sexual assault. Some lesbians have faced pressure to date trans women under threat of being labelled bigots. Just putting this out there because Lily Cade's repulsive tirade will be used to discredit the recent BBC article, which caused quite a stir, and I predict it will be taken down on that basis. Note here. End quote. Note here. And has also faced accusations of sexual assault. This was posted yesterday, okay? This was posted yesterday. We have long since got past the point where, I'm sorry, I do apologise about the train. Just gonna let that go past a little bit. That is a very heavy train. I was having such a moment. I'm sure I will cut this out if I do end up uploading separately. Good enough. Okay. But yes, note the facts that we are well and truly beyond the point where it's accusations. Lily Cade's admission, her confession that she has raped multiple people, naming 3 of them, has been out there for about a week now. And Rosa Dawn is still lying to her viewers, pretending like she has faced accusations of sexual assault, which, by the way, in the very language, is kind of trivializing what actually occurred. I believe you had some points about this when I talked to you before the show, Levi.
Yes, I am too tired to remember the special term for it, but you may, if you've studied writing, you may have heard of like these zombie sentences where basically they cut out the subject of this, they cut out the person who was doing the thing. And the way you can tell if it's this kind of sentence is if you add by zombies, then it makes sense. So instead of
it is.
It works either way.
And has also faced accusations of sexual assault.
It works either way. I could be wrong.
Either
my point is like it's written in a way that really sucks the energy out. It's not like she was accused.
It's just faced accusations. And like the whole notion of face past tense, the notion of face past tense also suggests like it was unfounded and she's overcome it. There's also that implication there. But again, it has been widely spread about that Lily Cade is a serial rapist. She has admitted to this. It is well known. Here is a link to her confession. And yet Rosa Dawn is still lying to her viewers because she has to. Because this information was out like days before the manifesto came out. So the fact that she didn't say anything then as she continued to promote it, it begins to look a little iffy, especially when Rosa Dawn's entire thing is pretending like she takes a hardline stance against sexual predators when, again, the gender critical movement as a whole is defined by its predatory nature in ideology and action. Not some invented cabal, anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic conspiracy. Actual evidence we have supplied throughout this 3-hour thing. And again, links to everything we've discussed in the description. There's a transcript, you can get it there. But yeah, I don't know if there's anything you want to add on to that.
Nope.
Okay, but I just wanted to point that out because, it's interesting really to watch how she is trying to worm her way out of this when, no, she has helped promote a sexual predator, a serial rapist.
And nobody was shocked.
Nobody was shocked. And it kind of points to this whole bigger issue here in, again, this is the gender critical manifesto. This is the defining compilation of what it means to be gender critical. This Elliot Rodger style manifesto just shows us that Caroline Lowbridge, is Lily Cade. Rosa Dawn is Lily Cade. Graham Linehan is Lily Cade. Kathleen Stock is Lily Cade. Rachel Oates is Lily Cade. Get the L Out is Lily Cade. Linda Bellos is Lily Cade. J.K. Rowling is Lily Cade. All of these people that have promoted, trans women as violent monsters and everything like this, and, trans men as vulnerable girls, these are all part of the same ideology. They use the same language, they use the same rhetoric, they demonize trans people, You can't escape that. And don't let them escape that. Don't refer to what Lily Cade wrote as anything but the gender critical manifesto. Never let them forget. Never let the BBC forget, never let Caroline forget, never let Rosa Dawn forget. Keep on it. Keep pointing it out. Keep vigilance. Stay woke. I realize that's what it's kind of getting to here. But the point is, don't let them get away with it. Keep their feet on the fire, and eventually they're going to burn out. This whole thing has been interesting because there have been gender criticals out there, again, I mentioned this earlier, who are like, all of these people in this article are heroes, and then later on, who is Lily Cade? Why are they important in this conversation? Rosa Dawn is pretending like Lily's role in the story was like a minor one, kind of irrelevant. It's like she forwards herself as the cotton ceiling woman. the whole buzzword, the whole Planned Parenthood are secretly teaching trans women how to rape lesbians conspiracy. She is not a small part of the story. She is the story, and you're a character in it. So yeah, that's what I really wanted to say. Anything you would like to add?
I think I'm all out of ideas for today.
So yes, I think that is a good place to wrap up the show. Hopefully it was okay. Again, this is just an emergency stream. We covered a lot of information. I will make sure to add that Rosa Dawn link to the transcript. That is the last link, because I literally did that 5 minutes. I remembered it like 5 minutes before the stream. Like, oh shit, I've got to add this in. I did add the actual quote, but I didn't add the link. So I'll go do that now. I've been a naughty girl. But yes, I do want to, of course, thank all of our wonderful patrons. I know I didn't do it at the start like I usually do. It's just been a mess with everything. Oh, I'm sorry. I've also got a bit of dust in my throat, which is just really starting to irritate me. It's just good that we're coming to an end. I'd like to thank all of our Patreon sponsors who have supported us on the channel. You are the only reason we can keep doing this. A specific thank you to Matthew Kovac, Hannah Banghart, Gert Van Vorst, and Cthulhu. You are all wonderful people. It helps us so much. If you'd like to know how you can help the channel in future, there's a Patreon link down below. Check that out. Help by there. Every little bit helps. Even $1 goes a long way. Especially with Adito currently being out of work. It really, like, right now, if you're ever going to give, right now is the time to give. But yes, hopefully you learned something. Hopefully this got me an interesting conversation. Hopefully we haven't said anything that, like, was upsetting. I apologize for my my anti-blind ableism earlier. I didn't mean to do that, but hey, there's a whole thing of like being better, and like there's 3 points that you can correct yourself. You can correct yourself before, you can stop midway during, or you can do it after. And I got on the after, but still, yeah, I am sorry about that.
I'm sorry, Higgins. Just
oh god, Higgins. Higgins is angry that I can't say sexual Wissenschaft.
I think it was like sexual Wissenschaften?
Sexual Wissenschaften.
Something like that. Don't quote me on that.
It is double V. It is double V, so it's like Max Weber. I say Weber, right? I think I do. This is why I'm going to get the seagull screaming at me.
Just Google
that is a loud train. But yes.
There are sites where you can Google and it will like play the thing.
I know. But anyway, yes, we shall let you all go. Thank you all for turning up, and yeah, keep safe, everyone. If you're a member of the trans community, do little things to help yourself right now, little aftercare stuff, and yeah, just like treat yourself. Okay.
Thanks for watching, everyone.
Thanks for watching.
Not laughing at all my mistakes.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye. I'll leave the stream running for a little bit so you can all say goodbye to each other. Bye.